Welcome to the Rising Society podcast. I'm Shane Kennedy.
I'm Nico Galliano, the rejected gentleman.
And tonight we're joined by a very special guest.
This fucking guy is unbelievable.
I want you to keep that.
You don't mute your fucking phone?
We're keeping it.
There you go. There you go.
Okay, here we go.
There you
all
go.
right. Shannon, it's been a while, brother. I know this is your third time. I've missed the hell out of you, dude.
Bam.
It's always a pleasure. We've been on our
brother.
hiatus.
Yes, we have.
He's kicking us back into it.
Yep.
We're going to keep this going.
This is the best kickoff that I could think of.
Yeah.
Respect.
That's right.
So tonight we're going to kind of review a topic that we've already talked about, but we're going to kind of go. This will be an opportunity for us to kind of go a little bit deeper and from a different point of view. You know, so we're going to be talking about the founding of feminism. Actually, in particular, the foundress of feminism.
Foundress.
You know, and we. At the Rising Society podcast, we love using gendered language, right?
Okay.
That's something that we absolutely love.
That's a must, yeah.
You know,
Gendered language.
So
Right.
we're going to be talking about the foundress of feminism, whose name was Mary Wollstonecraft.
Okay.
And Mary Wollstonecraft lived. She was an English woman, philosopher. Again, the world's first feminist. She was born in 1759. So we're talking about a long time ago, right?
Not really.
Well, I mean, we're talking about what, like 300 years, a little bit north of 300 years ago, right? Or no, a little bit less than 300 years ago.
1759. I mean, it's before the French Revolution.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Before the American Revolution.
So she was born quite a while ago, and so I've got some points here to go over, and then this won't take very long, and then we'll start kind of discussing it.
Okay.
So first thing, we have a few terms that we need to make sure that we've mastered first. So the definition of feminism, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, is belief in and advocacy of the political, economic, and social equality of the sexes, expressed especially through organized activity on behalf of women's rights and interests. Okay, so basically what we need to keep in mind is that feminism means to dismantle the patriarchy, right?
Okay.
You know, basically what they would argue is that the entire framework of society is geared toward the oppression of women by men, right?
Okay.
You know, and referring to both of them as being groups. All right. So next, we'll notice three ingredients in the kind of in the primordial ooze of that feminism springs from. One, something that we'll notice is that there's typically an abusive father and poor relationship with the father in there. Second thing is there is normally Unitarianism, and there's usually a fixation on the occult in one way or the other.
Okay.
Now, and the fixation with the occult, it becomes more pronounced as time goes on. And then there's an advocacy and then the third thing is there's an advocacy for free love, and this advocacy for free love, it ends up with, and kind of the driving force of it is to annihilate the family and to dissolve marriage in society.
They're obsessed with sex with no connection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And really, it's largely a rebellion against the Christian order. Full stop. And then just to kind of put Unitarianism into perspective, a Unitarian is one who believes that the deity or God exists only in one person. And a Unitarian is a member of a denomination that stresses the individual freedom of belief, the use of reason in religion. That's the only real component in religion is reason. They believe in a united world community, and they kind of believe that all religions are kind of roads leading to the same place.
Wow.
And that the kind of the details of one particular religion or creed, that they're all kind of relative, that it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
In fact, why don't we go ahead and pause here, and what do we have to say about that?
Well, the idea that all religions lead to, a very noted individual said this not recently, but a couple years ago, that all religions lead to ultimate truth or something like that. Didn't they say that? I'm not going to say no names, but it seems like that idea has sort of infiltrated every part of Western culture.
Yeah.
That all religions are correct in some ways. That reason is the ultimate decider on, what man should do. So that, we're sort of in a culture right now, modernity, really has a what did you say? Like is in opposition to like the fundamentals of Christianity.
Yeah,
right?
it's basically an open rebellion, right?
And so would you say that Unitarianism is in opposition to Trinitarianism? They don't believe in
right, like so. And I think a way to kind of even to distill this even deeper is we have to remember that and it's something that I don't even think most of us are aware of. We learn about the Enlightenment, but we really don't understand what the Enlightenment was about.
Yeah.
And the whole argument of the Enlightenment, when you get down to the bare bones of it, and I know people are probably going to they're going to be persnickety and they're going to want to try to argue this point, but it's pretty clear that what the core argument of the Enlightenment is that the only way that you can acquire truth, right, and the only way that you can encounter what is real is through reason, and that's it. That there is no other way, right? Now, the thing is, Christianity, explicitly from the very beginning, has always taught. The church has always taught that there are two ways of arriving at truth, and it's not that it's one or the other. It really requires both. It's faith and reason.
Okay.
And so reason would be basically you arriving at a conclusion based upon kind of induction and deduction, right? So you would basically think about things in terms of logic, and you would think about things in terms of you might analyze evidence, you might analyze arguments, and you basically be thinking about what is the most reasonable, right? So you'd be using your reason. Right? Now, the other wing to knowing anything, the other wing to encountering truth and to understanding things is faith, which means that that you receive that you receive something because you trust the authority it comes from.
Well, okay. When you say deduction and induction, okay, what about when you ever heard people say like, okay, yes, there's reason, right? Like the whole idea of like, I think, therefore I am. Right? Descartes said, I think, therefore I am.
Yeah.
But then there's also people who say, okay, but there's also another way to truth, which is through like experience.
Right.
Right? Like through testing stuff. Like it has to be material. Now, what would that be called?
So
is that deductive?
So that perspective would actually be. So what you're kind of talking about is empiricism.
Empiricism, yeah.
And empiricism divorces reason from faith, and says that reason is the only way of acquiring knowledge or acquiring truth, because what they say is that you're taking the raw material facts and you're processing them through your reason. Okay. So basically what they're saying is that you can't trust anything. Now, the problem with that is, my question to you is, have you ever been in colonial America?
I have not.
Okay. Did you ever go to colonial America?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And I will admit,
yeah,
I have never been to colonial America.
Okay. I did go to Philadelphia one time.
Okay.
I just want to point that out.
Well, and I went to Philadelphia when I was a little child back in 1999.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the colonial period had long since passed, right? And the colonial period had long since passed since you went there. Yeah. Did you ever go to Philadelphia?
I've never been to Philadelphia.
Okay, so you never even went to the modern Philadelphia, let alone the colonial one.
Yeah.
So the reason I ask that is we trust the authorities, whomever they are, whether they're their primary sources in books, like let's say the writings of Ben Franklin that would be writing about what life was like in colonial America, or we're trusting in some academic who's written a history book that's explaining what life was like in colonial America and what the intricacies were and how things worked. But the thing is that requires trust in some kind of an authority, right? Okay. So the thing is, from the Enlightenment point of view, that says that the only way that you can know anything is via your reason. Trusting in someone else's authority is absurd and it makes no sense, right? So that is one of the issues. I think that that's one of the reasons that I really don't care about the moon landing argument one way or the other. But that's one of the things I really enjoy about it is that the only way that you trust that we went to the moon is because, or the only way that you know that we went to the moon is because you trust the authority of NASA.
I do not.
Right? And that's the thing. I don't really, I don't care. I guess I'm kind of like I'm a skeptic when it comes to NASA. And honestly, I don't really care that much. But the thing I find interesting is you have all these people that are like, Christians just suspend their reason and just cling to their faith, and they use their faith as a justification to just be stupid. But those people at the same time, they're so dogmatic about the moon landing. You know, I mean, if they were able to, a lot of these people, they'd want to burn you at the stake for questioning the moon landing. So the thing is that they dogmatically believe it, even though they've never actually been to the moon, and they were never in a position where they could witness it themselves, so that they could use their own reason to process whether it happened or not.
And just trying to bring this full circle back into feminism and their kind of stance on not only, I know you guys are talking about knowledge, but you said in like faith-based, there's no true one religion. They kind of all get you there. They're all different roads to the same destination. And I think to kind of simplify this, or as you so wittingly said, to distill it a little further, I think it's kind of the old metaphor. I don't know if you guys ever heard it. If you have three blind people, right? And one of them, they all go to touch an elephant. And one of them touches the tusk, right? And then one touches the skin, and the other touches the hair on the tail. And you ask them what is an elephant, they're going to describe it based off three different perspectives. And that's kind of where feminism is, right? They're like, there's no truth to what an elephant is. It's your relationship with the elephant. So the first man's the tusk. It's just as true as the third man where it's the hair. Well, that's not true, because we do have authority and we do have truth that has come down. Right. Not only historically, but from, of course, I believe we're all Catholic. So we have not only church authority, but we have spiritual authority on this. Right. And an elephant has been described on what an elephant is. It's all three parts, and it's been very well described and laid out on what it is. Yeah. Feminism's whole, in my understanding of what feminism does, is they try to break down those those set in stone things. They try to fragment it and say, not only do we need to put more stock in, knowledge and all of this, and less on what they would consider superstition or religion, because they don't really hold a place. But the funny thing is it turns full circle on them. So they rely so much on knowledge, but then they start getting into superstition themselves, and you start seeing occult stuff like Shane, you hinted. I think you said this earlier. They get real weird with like occult things. Yeah. And they start getting into
witchcraft,
like demonic spirituality, right? Yeah. So they start getting into these like weird things where it always starts off with knowledge, then goes into science, and then it goes into, science can only go so far. So they go into the unexplained, but science simply is either not there yet, or it can't explain these things. Right. So they have to fill it with something. Right. And since they've already made a stance that it cannot be religion, they have to fill it with something. So they get into this weird kind of, sorry if I'm far away from the mic, they get into this weird kind of like if you will, allow me to kind of, I'm sure they would disagree with me, this like magical element.
Very esoteric.
Yes, and they start doing very weird shit.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of, I hope I used a lot of words to say very simply that I think they try to fragment societal norms
Yeah.
that have been established. They hate the idea of unity between a man and a woman, becoming one in the glory of God. They can't stand that.
Yep.
I know as Catholics we believe in this, and I believe Orthodox is going to be the same way. But we believe too that the greatest thing that a man can do is the sweat on his brow, right? That's one of the biggest things that brings you closer to God is the sweat on our brow, protecting our family, providing. And that's our way, not the only way, of course. The only way is through, Christ. But the closest that we can get to that kind of thing is a sweat on her brow. And for a woman, the closest thing would be having a child.
Okay.
So at least my understanding of Catholicism, and I believe Orthodox believe this too, those are two of the biggest things that you can do.
Right.
That does not bode well with feminists.
Yeah. I want to, I guess my question is, why do they feel that way? Why do they think that? And why do they have such a, what seems to be like a hatred for tradition, traditional values and everything. Shane, you brought up at one time, you talked about the First World War and how that had brought about, a lot of men had died during the war.
Yeah.
And, so there was a lack of fathers in the home and stuff like that, you know what I mean? And a lot of the men that had come back home were had shell shock and all that kind of stuff, PTSD and everything. And, had just fallen into really bad, just hard lives or whatever. And so, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, do you think that there's something that men did or that, say our government did or whatever to cause that breakdown within the family and cause that breakdown between, males and females? I mean, is there something that we would have done to cause them to have sort of a reaction like that? You know what I'm saying?
I'm gonna let you fire from the hip here. Yes, so I do think that in a way you can hold men responsible for feminism beginning to fester because we have an obligation and a duty. We have a duty to uphold our responsibilities of what it is to be a man. I know that's heavily contested now because I don't even know if for 30% of society even says that there's a such thing as a man. But historically and for us, there are certain things that a man does. And it's not because we necessarily want to do it. It's not because society says it's inherent in us that I have to do this because I have an obligation.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think if you look at it, and I believe this rings true, and you just said it, there's usually a breakdown with these women where they have been neglected for male guidance, which God bestowed upon man as one of our duties. They usually have a father figure that was either abusive, no matter how we want to describe abuse here, not in the picture at all, or laissez-faire, if you will, a deadbeat or something like that. Neglect of some sort. So the father figure wasn't this ideal of what a man should be, and it starts festering. If a man's not going to uphold his end of the bargain of what a man's supposed to be, you start getting women that don't know what it means to be a woman.
Right. Okay.
So it starts breaking down, it starts festering, and that is exactly what happened here. Is you have these women, and it festered out into a thing, and then men started listening to it, and they started reasoning with it on level footing, right? They're like, oh, well, yeah, it's all the way to the, whether we agree with this or not, the right to vote, the right to do these things. So you started splitting households, right? Never before was there such thing as a split household. If I voted one way, that's the way my wife voted.
Yep.
We didn't. There was no split households. We didn't cancel each other out.
Yep.
Never publicly would we become in disagreements with one another. It was always unity.
Right.
We would never show discontent for one each other or speak badly about each other publicly.
Yep.
Caesar famously said that. Remember, with his wife that was suspected on cheating on him. And there's different historical people you can point to on this, so there's not actual hard evidence. But even Caesar said it doesn't even matter if you did or you didn't. Caesar's wife must be above suspicion. So there can't be, you can't have a house that has cracks in the foundation and that's going to lead to any success whatsoever. It has to be unity.
Right.
So when this started festering on women and women took off with it, these women, you got to remember, their ideals can't be reproduced with a strong man. A strong man would simply never put up with it. The ideal man would never reproduce with these kinds of women.
Right.
So you get weaker and weaker and weaker men because the strong men, or the idea of what a man is dying off society. I mean, by society standards.
Yeah.
So it's just decay upon decay from both sides. You can't blame women 100% on this.
No.
I don't think that's...
But, okay. You know, Shane, you said something about how certain, what'd you call them? Wasps?
Yeah. The
Okay.
and wasp for
Are you guys talking shit about Italians? What is
no. Shannon did not say wops.
Oh, okay. Oh, what did you say?
Yeah, no. No.
Wasps.
Oh,
Yeah,
wasps.
wasps.
I misheard. Okay, I was like, really? Right in front of me, huh?
So for anybody that doesn't know, WASP is an acronym that demographers and sociologists use to refer to white Anglo-Saxon Protestants.
Correct. Okay. I heard incorrectly. I apologize.
White Anglo-Saxon Protestant, and it's usually typically you're referring to men. Yeah, okay. you know, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant men. Continue.
Okay.
Sorry.
Now,
Which none of us are, by the way.
right. I mean, that's true.
That's exactly right.
It might be somewhere in the blood, though.
Yeah,
You know,
for
I
sure.
don't-
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but anyways, you were talking about how there was an attempt by elite wasps to dismantle or to break down the family too, right? Like break down American families, and put women in positions of of working and stuff like that. Can you talk about that a little more? Because I feel like that's part of the reason. Okay, I think of it like this, and I'm not trying to pin it on old rich white men or anything like that. I'm just saying these are white men who are powerful, and maybe they want to keep that in place. Like they don't want to lose their positions of power. So how do you maybe keep your position of power? Well, you make men who are not in those positions, you disrupt that, right? You put them in positions where they can't be in competition with you, at all. And how you do that? Well, you destroy their families, send them off to war. You know what I'm saying?
Well, and this is another thing that I think a lot of, all three of us have talked about this together and separately. Is that it seems like, so now that World War II is becoming something that we can talk about a little bit more dispassionately, that we're able to kind of step back and we're able to put a little bit more of a critical eye on it than let's say 20 or 25 years ago, where you couldn't question the merits of the Allied side and you couldn't question. You basically had to say that and for the record, I'm glad that the Allies won. The Axis powers were bad.
But you were kind of cockled by the morality of
right,
it without you couldn't even raise questions.
But this is the thing. Like 25 years ago, you had to say the Allied powers were 100% good, and the Axis powers were 100% bad. Now today,
the Japanese surrendered.
Yeah. Now, and this is the thing. Today, I think you can get away. I think it's more acceptable to say that, let's say the Allies were, I don't know, 70%, in the moral right. And let's say that the Axis powers were 85% in the moral wrong. That is something that would not have been tolerated 25 years ago. But today, today that's acceptable. And so the whole reason I say that is that I think when we talk about war, it's very important to understand that war beyond all the killing, beyond all the competition for resources, the elites view war as an opportunity to re-engineer society. That's what they always do. They did it. In the American context, they did it during the Civil War. They did it in World War I. They did it during World War II. They did it during Vietnam, and especially they did it during the War on Terror. Now no one's going to be allowed to put a critical eye on the War on Terror probably for 70 to 80 years. Right. You're going to have to wait for our generation, the millennials, to pass on to our final reward. Yeah. But we can look back at World War II, and in many ways, I think World War II, from the American point of view, I think was very much a social engineering opportunity. What they did was they brought a bunch of men, or they drafted loads of men, for the war effort. And largely what they did was they took them, and you had all these men that were, men from ethnic communities. And when I say ethnic communities, I'm not, I don't misconstrue what I'm saying, but when I say ethnic communities, what the thing I'm saying is you've got like Irish Americans,
right?
You have Italian Americans, right? You have Jewish Americans, right. You have African Americans, yes. The descendants of slaves, right. And they all have their own intricate communities, prior to World War II, right. Where they had organized social systems where they looked out for one another. Mm-hmm. And then what happened was, when they were drafted into the US military at the beginning of World War II, they were drafted into it as Italian Americans, Black Americans, whatever, Jewish Americans. And then when they came out, they were socially engineered during the war to view themselves as just being Americans. Okay. So then you ended up having kind of the dismantling of these ethnic neighborhoods throughout the country that really kind of ran the country. Mm-hmm. You had Irish ethnic neighborhoods, Polish ethnic neighborhoods, Black ethnic neighborhoods. You had all these different ethnic neighborhoods around the country. Now, I'm not saying that people should have been forced to remain in those neighborhoods. But I guess the thing I'm saying is that what I believe is that the powers that be at the time, they wanted to eliminate any rival power centers to their own, right? And they successfully did it.
So in going back to feminism, one way that maybe you could say, maybe not in the first wave, but say down to the 20th century. Perhaps one way you do that is to weaken, mentally weaken, physically weaken, spiritually weaken the men.
Yeah.
Financially weaken, the man, right? And, give incentives, to women to kind of like make justifications for why the man shouldn't be there anymore, mm-hmm. Right? I was listening to this economist one time, and he was talking about African Americans. This was what they call the Great Migration. Mm-hmm. You guys ever heard of that?
Yep.
So, like there were two waves of it, and a lot of the families that came from the south to the north, like what had happened is that, so culturally, I guess African Americans were not used to being individualistic. They weren't used to being like, by themselves, or kind of like, like as one man, I'm going to go out and do this, and champion the world type of thing. They were very family oriented and community oriented, right? And when they got to the north, like to the major cities like Chicago, Philadelphia, New York, Boston, DC, stuff like that, right? It became, Detroit, LA, right? It became much more, it became easier for them to kind of see themselves as individuals, and for the men and these young guys to kind of want to leave that sort of working class lifestyle, right? And they want to be basically, boss guys. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want to make money. Mm-hmm. I want to, I want the girls. I want the clothes. I want the fashion. And so that, in a sense, I think, it seems like there were incentives that were put in place to dismantle that. And I don't think that this is just a problem for African Americans. I think it was a problem for Italian Americans.
A problem for everybody.
A problem for Irish Americans, because people have this whole idea that like it's just black people on welfare, and I'm like, no. There are white like people on welfare too. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like the Irish girl, or who has Irish ancestors is a baby mama too. Yeah. The Italian girl is a baby mama too. The Latin American girl is a baby mama too, right? What is what seems to be the ones that ain't baby mamas? the wasps.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that
or I mean, at one time, maybe that's not the way it is now, but I'm just saying,
it's really interesting to note, and we don't, we'll get back to feminism.
Okay.
But I wanted to point this out for anybody that's interested. Go and look up something called Bacon's Rebellion. It happened in 1676 in the Virginia colony, and what I would argue is that the social categories of white and black were constructs. Mm-hmm. Created by the Virginia colony to manipulate and control the subjugated the people that were subjugated by the wealthy WASP plantation owning class. Mm. And the groups I'm talking about are African slaves and Scottish and Irish indentured servants. Mm-hmm. And what happened in the Bacon's Revolution, in Bacon's Rebellion, I mean, in 1676 in Virginia. Long story short is that you had the Irish and Scottish indentured servants and the African slaves. They were like, this whole thing is bullshit. Mm-hmm. That they're like these English are keeping us on their plantations. And they're making us they're making us harvest all this stuff and everything, and they're really not treating us very well. Right. So we're going to stand in solidarity. We're going to stand in solidarity together, and we're going to rise up against them. Mm-hmm. And what they did was they ended up putting down the unified, I guess what we could say is like working and enslaved class. Mm-hmm. Basically the slave class, the African slaves, the indentured servants, everybody, they ended up putting them down. And then that was actually the very first time that take a little bit more. That was actually the very first time that you see the terms white and black used in a legal situation. The Virginia, what was the Virginia Parliament called? It was the Virginia.
Commonwealth.
Yeah, it was a Commonwealth of Virginia, but it was called like it was the House of something, or it was basically the Congress of Virginia. They
I know what you're talking about. The House of
yeah,
it doesn't matter. Okay, yeah, I got you.
You know,
the House of no.
Yeah, but so basically what they did was they told the Irish and Scots, they were like, oh no, so you guys are white and you're different, and they told the African slaves, you guys are black and you're different. You know you guys, and the whole reason that they did that was to break the solidarity between them, so that they could control them.
Right.
And so the thing is, this was an artificial construct that came out of this really tiny WASP,
very
controlling class of people. Yeah, I mean, we're dealing with like people say like 0.1% of the population. That's probably it was probably something like that. Mm-hmm. Out of the WASP category, you're talking about a hyper small group of people. Mm. But the reason that they did that was so that they could perpetuate the system that was working out really, really good for them. Mm. And so I guess the whole point of all of this, to kind of wrap it up and put a bow in it, is that you've had this adversarial relationship between like national power centers and local power centers. Mm-hmm. And the national, remember, in the terms of 1676, during the Bacon's Rebellion that I'm referencing, a national power center in this time would be like a Virginia power center.
Okay.
Because the colonies were essentially like their own little, they were almost like their own little countries, mm-hmm. sort of.
Right.
So for them, they did not like the idea of there being these local kind of solidarity movements between workers, mm-hmm. and within plantations. And basically all they were demanding is, they're like, hey, now this isn't the way that they would have articulated it at that time, but basically what they were like is, hey, okay, so you guys are making X amount of dollars. You guys are making X amount of dollars in profits. Mm-hmm. We deserve just a little bit of that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that little 0.1% plantation class were like, no.
Yeah.
We would rather manipulate you through propaganda.
Yeah.
And so the only reason I said that is, look this up. Bacon's Rebellion, 1676, Virginia, black and white. And that is the first time, to my knowledge, that the black and white are codified into law in any kind of a legal system.
Yeah.
First time. And I find that it's really, really interesting. And so the thing is, there's been this tension mm-hmm. in American history of these large power centers, mm-hmm. which would eventually evolve after the founding of the American Republic. Mm-hmm. You would end up seeing these like national power centers, especially after the Industrial Revolution mm-hmm. really took hold in America in the North. Mm-hmm. There's this tension between national power centers, which are really kind of like industrialists, mm-hmm. And financiers and bankers and stuff, versus everybody else, like the little local power centers. And what I believe is that tension manifested itself in terms of kind of like ethnic neighborhoods and ethnic communities mm-hmm. versus these like national power centers. And they did not like the idea that Irish Americans stood together as a power center, or that Italian Americans stood together as a power center, or that Black Americans stood together as a power center.
Right.
They didn't like that. So they wanted to atomize them all.
What's the other thing that I think they didn't like? They didn't like the fact that, one, African Americans tended to have large families.
They hated that. They hate that.
And what's another group that tends to have large families?
Catholics.
Mm-hmm. So, how do you, maybe, they say, well, yes, black people can continue to keep having babies, but let's make sure that they have babies out of wedlock. Mm-hmm. The Catholics can keep having babies, but let's make sure they're, in ghettos. let's keep them in high densely populated areas where they can't really rise to the top.
Well, and this is the thing, the groups okay, so we're kind of all over the place.
Yeah, we're going far afield.
Boys.
So the thing is, the WASPs loved contraception. Maybe not necessarily abortion, but they loved contraception. The Carnegie Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, all these different big WASPy foundations during the early 20th century, they were pushing contraception all over the country. They were even going into places like Mississippi and Louisiana, and largely women of color. They were going after them, not exclusively them, but largely women of color. They were going after them, and what's the word? It's like tying their tubes, or it's
So I know that there was one. I forget what that story is. The Tuskegee experiment or something like that. Was that
where they used African Americans as guinea pigs for vaccines?
Yeah.
Right.
And then you have what's the lady's name who founded Planned Parenthood?
Margaret Sanger.
Margaret Sanger, right? Who was like,
she was a nasty Nazi.
Yeah, like an avid,
disgusting woman,
abortionist, right?
Yeah, abortionist. Yeah, a nasty woman.
Yeah, So I just say that to say, I think fundamentally for me, I think feminism in its later stages had in mind to disrupt the nuclear family. You know what I'm saying? The traditional family. And how do you do that? You find a way to remove the man from the picture. You talk about
they naturally had to, because it's set up as the only systems that actually work and have ever worked and will ever work. We can go back to the beginning of civilization all the way till now.
Yeah.
It's never happened. One person I like a lot is Andrew Wilson. He talks about this in depth. The reason that they have to go against the patriarchy, even if it's just on a theoretical level, if they can get enough people to buy into the bullshit, they had to kill the nuclear family. They had to kill the idea that a man has to be at the head of the helm, right? And because men have an absolute monopoly on force.
Like, you mean like physical?
Men have an absolute monopoly on force.
Yeah.
Women can never truly be in control past what men allow them to have.
Right.
And we have modern day actual evidence of this. For instance, there has never been a society of all women,
right,
that has been of any significance.
Right, it's
that
never
they've
survived.
been a world power.
Yeah.
And then they're going to go, well, there's never been one of all men either. Well, that's not necessarily true. We do have military campaigns that have lasted 5, 10, 15, 20 years throughout history of armies that would move. And in these armies, for the most part, though there would be women that follow along in, they call them like war families and stuff like that, or they go behind, the majority of it was men. The men would do the cooking, the men would do the cleaning, the men would do the security, they do the infrastructure for the camps.
Right.
And these are large groups of men, thousands of men, 5,000, 10,000 men at a time plus, right? And so though it wasn't a society, these were functioning operations of a large group of men, and everything went just fine.
Right.
So they have to kill the patriarchy because men have a monopoly on force. And in modern times, the examples I would use is we have several Middle Eastern countries where women have gained their freedoms. And then when men decided they no longer wanted them to have it, they went from having no freedom to men granting them freedom to the government changed, and the new people, usually through religious reasons, right? They decided they no longer wanted women to have those freedoms, so they simply took them back. And there was nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, that women could do to stop it.
So the example you would point to is Afghanistan.
Afghanistan would be my number one example.
Okay.
Yeah.
Women had no freedom. Then they had freedom, and then they had no freedom again.
Right.
When men decide that they have enough of that and that we want freedom, you know what we do? We rebel. And through force, we either lose and continue to be subjugated by whatever authorities in there, or we rebel. And the biggest one I could think of is, I don't know, the American Revolution, right? We'll use that one, and we take it through force. And women simply can't do that.
Yeah.
So, yes, to bring it back to feminism, they have to kill that idea of the patriarchy.
Right.
Or they have no chance
Yeah.
of this little movement festering in and affecting and spreading like cancer into society.
Yeah.
They have to kill the strong man.
Right.
They have to.
Right.
He has to go away.
Yeah.
The Gary Cooper, strong cowboy type, that's got to die.
Yeah.
We can't have that. That's in complete opposition of what they believe in.
Yeah.
They need a Betty Rivets, women can do all this stuff.
Right.
Because it's simply not enough to just say men and women are completely different and they have their own strengths, but they are never stronger. Men are never stronger and women are never stronger than when they come together and make one
Right.
unified body.
Right.
That's the strongest a man and a woman will ever be,
Right.
and that is in the image of God.
Amen. Yeah.
That's my 2 cents on that. To bring that
I
back.
agree with that.
I don't know. I did a lot of talking right there, and I don't know if I said much.
No, it makes
I don't know.
sense. It makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you know, that you know what you talk about when you talk about like Afghanistan and everything. You know, you think about what was the whole objective, sort of the rhetoric from the American government with Afghanistan and Iraq and, you know, in the Middle East and even in Africa and Asia, right? It's this whole thing of we want to bring democracy to these places. Well, what is one way to bring democracy to these places is to introduce that culture to dismantling the patriarchy.
Yep. And they're really pushing contraception, abortion, and genital mutilation.
Right.
Those are really the 3 main things that they're pushing
Right.
socially.
Can I real quick? Can I just before I forget it? One reason I think when we're talking about WASP, and this has to do with feminism, so I'm gonna try to bring that back into this. When we talk about WASP, right, we're talking about these Protestants. The reason that I think feminism and you know the not necessarily the I don't think Protestants or Protestant religions go around thinking, oh, we're going to destroy the nuclear family.
Yeah,
I think
right.
they've been misled.
Right.
And the reason that you see Protestants where feminism and women kind of have this like gray area of they can kind of do like weird stuff that would not necessarily be acceptable in Catholic and
Right.
Orthodox religions.
Right.
Is
Like become
because
witches.
they don't have, and the reason that I think like your thing kind of not conspiracy but kind of that bird eye view of WASP and what they were trying to do, they don't have to answer to a church authority. They've gotten rid of a church authority,
Yeah.
right? They interpret the Bible themselves. They come up with this thing. Everyone's kind of their own authority.
Yeah.
It's that personal relationship with God.
Yeah.
I'm not saying anything bad about that.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
they're their own church authority.
Right.
They don't have to answer to a church authority or church history or anything like this.
Right.
2,000 years of history.
Right.
So if you can get rid of that,
Yeah.
right, there's no obligation to answer to this authority, this
Yeah.
history, what's expected of you. So the Protestants have set this up.
Yeah.
So it allowed for misguided men to
Right.
mismanage. And when I say manage, I know I'm going to get crucified for this. To not I'm gonna retract. I misspoke. It's the whiskey. Not mismanage,
Yeah.
to mislead
Okay.
as a leader. It allowed these Protestant men to mislead
Yeah.
their women.
Yeah.
And it allows for this kind of shit.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I wanna give credit where credit is due, and that's because another one that they kind of cracked heads was the Southern white men. You think about the Civil War, right?
Yeah.
You know, because if you talk about, if we say WASPs, well, that also includes Southern white men. They were
Yeah.
white American Protestants too, but they had a different concept of Protestantism than say their Northern counterparts.
Or even the upper crust,
Right.
that your average WASP Protestant
Yeah.
would be operating with a different framework,
Right.
than kind of the elites,
Yeah. Because
above them on either side.
well,
you know?
because most of the northern white men or whatever were like, Anglicans, Presbyterian, stuff like that, right? And then it's like the southern whites were what, like Southern Baptists, Pentecostal, like evangelical, holy rollers, tent people.
Well, actually, the interesting thing is there were a lot of Episcopalians in the South.
Really?
A lot of them.
Okay.
It's really interesting because remember something, that the North, what we call the North, was largely was the culture most heavily influenced by the Pilgrims.
Right.
And remember that the Pilgrims were a bunch of Calvinists. Right. And kind of the crown jewel, kind of like the southern state that set the tone for the rest of them. And not saying that they were all homogenous in the same way that the northern states were not homogenous either, but kind of the standard kind of like default setting of the South was kind of set by Virginia. Okay. Yeah, it was set by the tone of Virginia.
Okay.
And Virginia was staunchly Episcopalian.
Okay. Right.
So the interesting thing is that your Calvinist congregationalism was kind of the beating heart of the northern culture. Okay. Like that pilgrim kind of thing. And then the southern culture was very much Episcopalian.
Okay.
And it's in the way it operated.
So would you say that they? Okay, I got okay.
Yeah, and that's
I know
the thing.
This is going to veer off.
Well, and that's the thing. America is and has always been a fundamentally Protestant country.
Right.
Right. The United States.
Only two of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, if I'm correct on this, only two of them were Catholic.
Okay.
The one I know of,
and I might be wrong on that. I'm not a.
The one I know of,
very novice historian. Okay, so I think it was two Catholics, though. Might be wrong.
I'd say that's giving you a little bit too much credit.
Were they from Maryland?
Yeah, Maryland, and I think it was John Carroll. What was one of the Catholics, and I think the other one was from the same family, Carroll. I forget what that one's name was. I think one of them was like a Maryland farmer or something who was from the prominent Carroll family, and I think the other one was a bishop or priest or something. I could be wrong on that.
I think you are wrong on that. I think there's 100% chance he pulled that out of his ass.
No, it's the Carroll family from Maryland. Look it up, Google it, and Nico, listen, you are not actually you're an amateur.
Well,
and I agree with that statement because I made it.
Well, I think the bishop he's talking about, didn't he found like Georgetown University or something like that? Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
I think so.
I think he but anyways.
But okay, yeah. but so
you guys can chat GPT this shit later.
Yeah. Or you can use Grok. You can do whatever you want.
He would say Google it because he's old as shit. But the rest of us would say chat GPT it.
Well, you would be telling people to use AskJeeves.com.
Yeah, dude. Well, you'd be telling people.
I don't even think that exists anymore.
And look at the sun and see where the shadows land and try to figure it out. So
I personally do not believe in astrology.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So. But this is the interesting thing about America is you can look at how as Americans migrated west, so this is the thing that I find so interesting. And listen, I do not mean to be throwing shade at our Protestant brethren.
Yeah, no, they're
I do.
Okay, well, that's you. But so this is
I think they're fair weather Christian, feel good Christians.
Well,
I'll throw shade. And I think that's the problem is that we don't throw shade.
Okay, well
so
you know what?
I'll go ahead. I'll make a hard line in the sand, and I'll separate you two from this. This is my opinion, not the show's opinion, not Shannon's opinion, not Shane's opinion. I think we have a huge problem in this country of feel-good Christians, and I think it led exactly to the problems that we talked about today. So I mean to throw all the shade. As a matter of fact, my whole job is to cut down the fucking shade tree of this kind of laissez-faire pussification of Christianity, and I think they have perpetuated that, and I think that they will continue to perpetuate that, and I think until we get back that Christians can be strong examples of moral character in society and make lines in the sand of right and wrong, black and white. This is what it is. There's not gray areas and like, well, this is what I believe. That's what you believe. It's fine. Until we get to that, we can be understanding that there's different views, and we can be tolerant of it. But what we don't need to do is pretend, because that's how we lead to the, well, this is my truth and that's your truth.
Everything.
No.
So-
fuck no.
Yeah.
So yes, I do mean to throw shade, but continue.
Okay, so the thing I was going to say is that when you look at let's say New England, okay? So predominantly Calvinist, you know, Pilgrim origins and everything.
Well, not anymore.
Right, yeah, not anymore. But it's interesting because there's still a lot of there's still kind of they still have a lot of the Pilgrim sensibilities about them.
Yeah.
And there's an argument to be made that the woke culture kind of finds its origins in the Pilgrim culture.
I believe that.
You know, so the interesting thing is that that kind of like congregationalist Calvinist Pilgrim culture, the only way for you to reinforce it is through external reinforcement. You know, you have to have the laws that ban things like Christmas, and you have to have the laws on the books that shut everything down on Sundays. You have to have the laws on the books that prohibit all the right things in order for that Calvinist the Calvinist Congregationalist Pilgrim system to work. You know, and for that denomination to continue, right?
Okay.
So this is the thing. When you see the migration west in America, you have all these Congregationalist Calvinists that move west, and they start becoming gunslingers, right? They you know, and then what happens is you see the rise of like Methodism.
Okay.
You know, the Methodists and a lot of evangelicals and stuff, you know, go out into the West and re-evangelize the former Calvinists that have kind of fallen away, that no longer have the Calvinist fishbowl that they're swimming around in, that reinforces the and I'm not just saying Calvinists, but like the Calvinist Congregationalist Pilgrim culture,
The Puritan.
Yeah. You don't have that puritanical reinforcement that you have that you still have in many ways in New England to this day. When you had when you had all the people moving to like Ohio and moving to Indiana and stuff and moving west, you know, they no longer had that.
Right.
So they started becoming gunslingers. They started like opening brothels, and they started going wild, you know, because they no longer had these external constraints.
Right.
So what ended up happening down the road is they had to be re-evangelized to by different groups of Christian evangelicals. And then the same thing happens as they move further and further west, because then what happens is they get re-evangelized, a new kind of like system of control is put in place to put the proper taboos and to put the proper external limits to create like kind of a new fishbowl, you know? And then you end up having those people migrate further west.
Right.
And then it's a whole laissez-faire thing. The brothels start up again, and the gunslinging and everything.
Okay.
You know, and so that's the kind of the trajectory of American history. Now, this is the interesting thing with, you know, Catholicism is kind of like, you know, it has its own little operating system, you know, because we have tradition and we have the authority of the church.
Right.
You know, so we're not, you know, Catholicism is not really reliant on the government putting on there being these external these external limitations by the state placed on certain things,
Because we self-govern.
right? Yeah,
We govern through a higher authority than some
Yep.
kangaroo fucking court.
Right.
Yeah. And
through the sacraments.
Yeah.
yes,
Right.
through the sacraments and also through the authority of the church.
Right.
When Father from the pulpit says, on Sundays you don't need to be going out and getting drunk. On
Right.
Sundays you need to be spending time with your family. You need to be spending time with your church family and all.
Yeah.
You
in
know.
other words, sit your ass down
Yep.
and rest.
So that's the interesting thing about kind of the trajectory of American history.
Yeah.
You know, is and then it kind, in my mind, the final crescendo of this whole kind of, you know, in many ways is kind of like it's like a dialectical thing where you have like the protective.
Oh, you're kind of a wordy twat, huh?
Okay, here. So this is what I'm going to say is the protective Protestant fishbowl gets reestablished.
Okay.
Whenever you have the migration west.
Okay.
You know, now the final incarnation of this, I kind of believe, was Hollywood.
Okay.
And
Interesting. Okay. I like that.
And in Hollywood, you
see where
didn't
you're going.
have a Protestant system of control.
Who is in
that
control?
was put? I'm not going there. I'm not. I truly don't know.
I don't know.
You know that's a really good question,
So if
Nico.
it wasn't Protestants, was it Catholics?
I would largely say no, but you know, maybe the people in the comments can say what they think.
Can you guys comment what I don't know where you okay.
So the thing I'm saying is that the final incarnation of all of this is basically what was the founding of Hollywood, where basically it was kind of founded under the slogan of the Outback, you know, no rules, just right.
Right.
You know, where basically you don't really have any prohibition there.
Right.
There are no taboos. There are no external limits on anything. It's basically just very, very powerful, kind of like bosses.
Right.
That predate on young and beautiful people.
Right. Well, wasn't it also like?
This is gonna way off feminism. Right?
Holy
okay,
shit!
but-
Have we
well,
even talked about feminism?
You got us way off topic.
No, fuck off.
Well, going back to the religious dynamic here, wasn't it Calvinists or you know, what did you say, Presbyterians?
Presbyterians?
Episcopalians?
Episcopalian?
So the kind of, I guess the way you're talking about like the people from New England, or are you talking about?
What I'm trying to ask is, who were the ones that started first ordaining women as preachers, ordaining women as ministers?
I believe a lot of them were Unitarians.
Okay.
Which this is the interesting thing. You know, this is not. I'm not making a formulaic statement here. So please do not sit here and try to say, oh, you're making a formulaic statement.
I might. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So the thing is, what I find interesting is what you end up finding, what you see a lot of the time is that kind of like Calvinist, Congregationalist, Pilgrim, you know, or you usually have like New England was the first bastion of Unitarianism in America.
Okay.
And we talked about what Unitarianism was at the very beginning of this podcast. And I find it really interesting that a lot of the time, not always, so please do not sit here and try to accuse me of anything, all right? A lot of the time, Unitarians are just one generation down from a family or from a group of people having previously been Congregationalist Calvinists.
Okay.
Typically, I find that very interesting.
But wasn't John Adams a Unitarian?
I believe he was.
You didn't make your statement.
Was he?
You didn't make your statement. You went on this long spiel about how I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that, I'm not doing that, and then you never actually said your statement.
Well, I'll say it again.
I'm not letting you schedule.
Well, I'll say it again because I think that your attention was elsewhere.
It's not elsewhere. You didn't fucking say it.
Well, I'm gonna repeat it for you right now. Okay.
It's not repeating. You never actually said it.
The first group to ordain women as ministers.
He didn't say what he was going to say, and I'm going to make him say
the
it.
first group to ordain women in the United States, largely to get behind it, were the Unitarians. And the interesting thing that I have noticed, and this is not a formulaic statement, is that typically the people that become Unitarians are people who were previously basically like fallen away Congregationalist Calvinists.
Okay. That was not going to be your fucking original statement.
Yes, it was.
No, 100%. It was not.
Look at the tapes and clip it.
That is not where he was fucking going
clip
with
it.
that.
Clip it.
You got...
Doug Wilson might have a problem with that, Shane. He might argue that...
Well, okay,
I have a quick question.
Don't
can I ask a question? Can I ask a question?
Calvinists with Unitarians.
For Doug Wilson, this is what I'll say is fallen away Catholics. They tend to get into like weird magic kind of shit.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, they become witches. And what I'll say is fallen away Calvinists, they have a tendency to become Unitarians.
I would just like to ask a quick question, boys, real quick. Who the fuck is Doug Wilson?
Okay. You want to tell him, Shane?
No, I'll let you.
So
explain.
Doug Wilson is a Protestant minister, I think from Idaho, and he is, I guess he would be considered a Calvinist or a Presbyterian.
100%. Yeah, Calvinist.
Yeah.
He's from Idaho. Mm-hmm. Do we actually put any stock in what he's saying?
Just because it's from Idaho?
100%. Line in the sand.
Do you reject potatoes?
Yes. I think they're the worst thing. The worst thing that the Spanish have ever actually cultivated.
I disagree with you on almost everything that you just said.
Yeah,
Continue.
I knew
Sorry.
you would. You Irish prick. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, so I wouldn't say that I disagree with everything he says. Mm-hmm. I think some of the stuff
He's
says,
a brilliant guy.
Yeah. I mean,
Is this someone you know personally, or is this like some kind of figure?
no, yeah, he's like a prominent.
He's like a cultural force.
Have you interviewed him before?
No,
Is that what's going on? Okay.
I would like to.
Okay.
I would like to talk to
Well,
him.
Doug
Wilson.
Did you just call him Duck?
Doug Wilson. If you're watching this,
Pastor Wilson?
if you're one of the
Yes.
8 people that are watching this, Doug,
Yeah.
we would like to interview you.
He'd be great to talk to.
Yeah.
I don't think that I would.
He's
be
brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that I would be able to compete with him theologically. I think you would need like a Bishop Robert Barron for that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I wouldn't say that I disagree with everything he says. What I do think is that he has some good ideas. But I guess my thing is essentially, I mean, he's not a Catholic. Mm-hmm. And so, and I'm sure he has his own reasons for that and why he believes what he believes. But maybe he could give an answer to why feminism took such a hold in the Calvinist, movement or the Unitarian,
So real
movement.
quick, I actually did this for the audience at home. Mm-hmm. I ran the numbers, I did all the research, and I wanted to simplify it so people didn't have to do hours and hours and hours of comprehensive, tedious research. If you would like to be 100% correct, you would just follow Catholicism.
Right.
If you would like to be somewhere in the 80 percentile, you could do any form of Orthodox would be fine.
Okay.
And if you would like to be kind of in that like 30 percentile, you can go to our Protestant brothers and sisters out there. Yeah.
Okay.
Kind
You
of.
didn't include, Nico, you said Orthodox.
Yeah.
That would include the Oriental Orthodox?
Yes, correct.
Like the
That
Coptic.
kind of that 80 percentile,
Yeah. Okay.
maybe 75, depending on which kind of Orthodox you are.
Okay.
You could go do that because my most laughable thing that they do is they like to do the we originally wrote the Bible, not the Catholics.
Okay.
And that's just silly. I mean,
Right.
what are they talking
Yeah,
about?
this is the Catholics.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
no, the Orthodox claim that though, which is silly. But so that's why they're falling into the 80 percentile. But I will say this. I really do love my Orthodox brothers
Oh, me too.
and sisters. I have no I say that tongue in cheek, the 80 percentile thing. I really, some of my good friends and some of the people that I admire the most and that I could listen to for hours and hours and hours, smoke a cigar with, drink a bourbon with, and we're going to disagree about...
The Pope.
Yeah, we're going to disagree about some, like...
I mean, because
In
isn't
my
that like the
opinion-
main thing that they...
And by no means am I the world's greatest Catholic. I'm probably not even a good Catholic. If we're being honest, I'll go ahead and say it on record. I'm probably not even a good Catholic, guys.
I agree with that.
I would be... fuck you. I would be considered probably not the world's greatest
You just
Catholic.
made my case. Thank you.
But okay, well, you're a piece of shit.
You just made my case again.
Okay,
Thank
yeah,
you.
you're a piece of shit.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's my line in the sand again. My Orthodox brothers, I can honestly say that I enjoy them.
Yeah.
And the stuff we're going to disagree about, I don't think is deal breakers. I think we can both just agree to disagree.
Yeah.
And the substance, it's all there. But then we start getting into it, and that's why you see the dramatic drop off in my Protestant brothers, where it starts going down to like 30%. My Baptists, my Pentecostals, my my Methodists, and all that. And I'm not saying I have friends in all those categories, and I have been to all those churches, every single one of them.
What about the Independent Baptists?
I didn't know that. I didn't even know there was a difference. I've been to a Baptist church. I've been to a Methodist church. I've been to a Pentecostal church. I've been to numerous churches. I've been to a Calvinist church because I am someone that actually likes to see the other side, their perspective. I like to be challenged on my beliefs. I think it's important.
Yeah.
Wow, we have gotten away from feminism a lot, huh?
I wanted to.
I don't even know where the fuck I was going with that.
You know what? There is no one that I know that is more easily challenged than you are.
Dude, that's actually a really good point. And this show is all inclusive because I actually am challenged, and I'll go on record again. I am actually dyslexic, which is technically on the spectrum.
Okay.
Shane, what is yours called? What is the medical term for it? Mental retardation?
Oh, you're not allowed to use the R word. And also, too,
I just fucking did.
With that, I gotta take a pee-pee.
Oh, okay. So I just lost to someone. I'm sorry. YouTube's already done, so I figured I'd try to fuck up the other 3 platforms as fast as possible. I did use the R word, but not the hard R word, so Shannon's walking away.
I'll be back.
All right. Good. So let's keep this going. You want to kind of bring it back? You want to bring it back? Let's bring it back.
All right, so
Holy shit, I apologize.
all right, so here.
5 bourbons hits
You know
different.
what? Apology accepted.
Oh my god, dude, you are a pretentious C word.
Oh, like Caesar? Is that what you were going to say?
Not the word I was going to say.
I'm a pretentious Caesar. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I mean, you're calling me a tyrant, so whatever,
Yeah.
So let's kind of let's reel everything back in.
Yeah, bring it back.
And what we'll do is once Shannon gets back, we'll start going over the life of the foundress of modern feminism,
We'll just
Mary
start reading why it's not
Wollstonecraft.
here.
Well, Shannon doesn't know anything about her. I don't think he's ever even heard of
Dude,
her.
I can promise you one thing. Shane doesn't give a shit. So you can read it off and we'll roll with it.
Okay. All right. So, Mary Wollstonecraft was an English woman that was born in 1759. Okay.
Do we
No.
still need this plugged in or is this charged?
Oh, we need it plugged in.
Shit, dude. I need a charger.
If you unplug that thing, this whole thing falls apart.
It might be the best thing for the audience at this point.
Okay.
Dude, we got so many bourbons in us.
What? Oh, here. Do you see my backpack over there?
I see it.
It's the one that's got the red strap.
There's one fucking backpack.
Okay.
What were we gonna say?
So go into the backpack and you should find a
C charger.
Yeah, a C charger.
Is it recording?
Yeah. It's still recording.
We've lost the fucking plot at this point.
Okay. Do you see the cord?
Yeah, I see it.
Okay. All right. You found it. Now, the side that has 3 prongs, you plug it into the shape on the wall that matches that, and then listen. Shit. Here. Plug that back in, please. Okay. And then the one that is like the little mini USB, you plug that into your phone. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So basically, so Shannon, we're gonna reel it back into looking at Mary Wollstonecraft.
Okay.
So basically, what we did was we kind of expanded on the three major things that we're going to be looking for whenever we're looking at feminism in general, right? But when we're looking particularly at Mary Wollstonecraft, I'll go over those one more time really quick. We kind of hashed them out. Abusive father, poor relationship with the father, which is kind of like a poor relationship with it spills out into a poor relationship with men altogether, right? The second thing is Unitarianism and an interest in the occult. We've kind of hashed out Unitarianism.
And we established that that's usually the fault of the man, not the woman.
Yes and no. It's complicated.
No. Originally, it only could happen if it was the fault of the man.
Yeah.
Now, there's a shared responsibility in that.
I thought you meant just specifically Unitarianism. But we're talking about the whole unraveling here. Okay. So and then the
That's
final
where that R word comes back in.
the final third thing is an advocacy for free love, and a move to annihilate marriage, and it's really just like a subversion of Christian morals and virtues, right?
A bastardization.
What is free love? What does that mean?
Free love basically just means if it feels good, do it, and just
So nihilism.
right, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and
I am
just
certain I misheard you. What did you say?
Nihilism.
yeah,
Yeah, okay, yeah, gotcha. Okay.
What did you think I said?
No, it doesn't matter.
okay. So now.
Dude, I was like, what? I was like, we only got 2 platforms left. We only got 2.
Well, we're getting close to the only one. The only one that we're allowed on is going to be Rumble.
Yeah,
and
fuck.
that's about
I was
it.
like, dude, this is only airing on Rumble in about 2 seconds.
Yeah.
So-
Okay, so
Somebody's got to talk about it.
Mary Wollstonecraft is hailed as the foundress of modern feminism.
Okay.
She was born in 1759 and passed away in 1797.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to get into talking about her childhood. She had a traumatic childhood, to put it nicely, or to put it kind of softly. In her childhood, she dealt with an alcoholic, abusive, and wife-beating father whose name was John Edward Wollstonecraft.
Yep.
Okay.
He moved the family around quite a bit due to his financial hardships. He was really, really bad with money, and from what it sounds like, her childhood life was like being a wrestler in the World Wrestling Federation if everything in wrestling was 100% real.
So her father did not have a thing of self-control.
He would take like a full take like a folding chair and stuff, and
I didn't think it was possible. I'm going to let you continue. I didn't think it was possible.
what?
Why are you laughing? I didn't even say
Sorry.
anything. I didn't think it was possible for you to top some of the shitty analogies you've given in the past, but that might have been the worst fucking analogy I've ever heard in my life, dude.
You know what?
I don't even think you actually said anything.
I needed that commentary the way a
think
cat needs a
you're
Rolex.
like,
all right.
if this theatrical fake thing was, I actually don't even know where you're going
Oh, the
with that.
chair thing?
No, the whole
WWE.
wrestling thing. Dude.
Okay, so this is the thing. Assuming that the it's not WWF anymore. It's the WWE. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you.
Why would you
assuming
offend me, dude? That changed 30 years ago.
Assuming that
You old bitch.
assuming that the WWE were real, then that would be like her childhood, basically, right? Okay. Next, her mother's name was Elizabeth Wollstonecraft, and she, according to primary and secondary accounts, was weak-willed, and she was also harsh, specifically to her oldest daughter, Mary Wollstonecraft. Mary was also her least favorite child, loving Mary's brothers more. So Mary's mother simultaneously disliked her daughter and made it very known to her daughter, and preferred her sons over her daughter. Right. So Mary.
Can I stop you right there and kind of like assess that? Do you think that Mary Wollstonecraft had animosity towards her mother for preferring her brothers over her?
Oh, 100%.
And that plays into
We're dealing here with dysfunction junction.
like a mother-daughter rivalry type.
Oh, big time. Yeah, like rivalry, hatred, and then there are issues between her and her dad. Mary would often she would often have to fight her father to get him to stop hitting her mother.
Okay.
Right?
Like physical confrontation?
Yes. And then her mother would neglect and abuse her for getting in for interfering with her father.
Oh, what do they call it? Not
hitting her mother.
Stockholm, because that's where they want to
Stockholm
stay.
syndrome.
Yeah, is it
Right?
kind of like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then Mary, we know for a fact that in Mary's childhood she made one friend, with a neighbor friend of hers named Frances Blood, who was colloquially nicknamed Fanny, and we'll get back to Fanny in a little bit. Okay, so Mary wasn't educated as a child. And she really wasn't very religiously engaged. She was a baptized member of the Church of England. Okay. Unfortunately, it's not a You know.
I thought you weren't throwing shade.
Oh, you know what? I'm not going to. I'll leave that up to you. In fact, you've thrown all the shade that we need to throw tonight.
I'll be a fucking oak tree.
So after meeting Fanny, Mary ended up meeting another neighbor whose name was Mr. Clare. And Mr. Clare had a large book collection, and he would let Mary come over and read his books. This seems to have been the beginning of her education. All right?
Yeah.
So Mary would go over there and read his books. And then in her early life, because Mary was dealing with just a shit show at home. Dysfunction junction. She's having to fight her dad, and then her mom would want to fight her and everything. It's this big mess.
Yeah.
She moved out as soon as she could, and she worked as a caretaker for an elderly woman in another town. That woman ended up passing away, and when Mary returned home, her mother also died. Okay. And now, fortunately, this was a major opportunity in Mary's life after she moved home. Her childhood friend, neighbor, Fanny, actually started a school, and Mary went to work for her, right? Okay. And this was kind of an opportunity. Mary, this was kind of like a taste of what the life of independence was like to go and work for and with Fanny at Fanny's school, right? Right. Then Fanny's school failed. Okay. And then Fanny died.
Okay.
How did Fanny die?
I don't know.
Were they lesbians?
Most people don't think they were.
Okay.
All right. Now
that was a genuine question. I wasn't being.
No. Now, yeah.
I have. Yeah.
There's a lot of there's evidence that later feminists were, but we really don't know, right? And we're not here to throw shade on anybody, right?
I am.
I mean, so
I've made that very clear.
Then
right, guy.
Right from the start.
Then later on, as an adult, Mary ended up going and participating in the big kind of like crisis and big moment, the big event, the big headline of her adolescence of when she was like in her 20s, which was the French Revolution. Right. Okay. Mary defended the French Revolution.
French Revolution. How old is this bitch?
Well, the French Revolution happened. What was it in the 1780s?
70s, I think.
Okay, 1770s.
It is to be 1770
or 1790s, wasn't it?
It was I think it was the 80s and the 90s.
This would be 80. The beginning of the French Revolution.
Yeah.
This would be 1788.
So one of the big things that Mary was noted for is that Mary defended the French Revolution, which she'd actually gone to see in person. She'd actually gone there on the ground, in her writings and letters. And before ever having gone to see it for herself, her friend Thomas Paine. So Mary defended the French Revolution in her writings and letters. Now she started defending it before she'd ever even gone to see it.
89.
Right?
Thanks for making me look like an idiot, guys. Appreciate that.
Okay.
Now she had a very close friend named Thomas Paine, and she had actually written a pamphlet called A Vindication of the Rights of Men. Okay. Right, and this was directed at defending the French Revolution against one of his harshest critics, whose name was Edmund Burke. Right, okay. And for the people who don't know who Edmund Burke was, he was famous for the historical quote where he said, it was something like "evil prevails when good men do nothing." That was an Edmund Burke statement, and Edmund Burke was a famous conservative in the English Parliament. Who at the same time favored the American Revolution.
We like Edward Burke.
Yeah. Yes, we do. Okay. Yeah. It would have been nice if he would have
so he was
become a Catholic.
Of the French Revolution, but a proponent of the American Revolution.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Just because of the difference in the ideologies at the core of each one.
Right.
Mary was deeply interested in the cause of the French Revolution. Remember, let's harken back to feminism kind of being kind of like a proto-Marxist movement. The movement is kind of oriented towards subverting Christian morals.
Did you use the word hearken?
Yeah, hearken, of course.
You're such a twat.
So she actually traveled. So she traveled to France in 1793, and in France she ended up, free love. She hooked up with this American dude named Gilbert Imlay,
Okay.
and he knocked her up. She got pregnant.
Okay.
Many of her
Not
French
a
friends.
lesbian.
What?
She's not a lesbian.
No, listen, she was into free love like crazy, right? So, now when Mary was in France during the French Revolution, she obviously made a lot of friends, including this Imlay dude. She made a lot of other friends.
You're saying she spread it around town.
Well, I mean, a lot of people got to know her. Let's just say that, right?
She was very friendly.
Yeah, very friendly.
She was shaking hands.
You could say that,
Yep.
and
Or wieners.
and yeah, like you're talking like hot dogs and stuff.
Let me put my
I was
glasses
not.
back on.
So many. Now this is the sad thing about Mary. Many of her French friends were executed.
Okay.
And this by the revolutionaries, because remember, during the French Revolution, you ended up having one batch of revolutionaries would rip the heads off of the next of another batch of revolutionaries, and it would be so on and so on and so
I know who
on.
you're talking about, but the audience
Okay.
doesn't. You don't portray it. You just assume they know. They don't know what the fuck you're talking about, man.
So
Tell a story. You're a storyteller by nature. You're Irish.
that's our major export.
Yeah, tell a fucking story here.
And so Mary was terrified. Like, I mean, I could picture her being there in France, probably shaking.
All right, don't take it literal. Don't get too theatrical.
Okay.
Fuck.
So Mary ended up returning to Mary ended up returning to jolly old England, And this now listen, this was not an easy thing for Mary to do, right?
Okay.
So basically, this Imlay guy that knocked her up, he went to the American embassy in Paris and lied to them and told them that Mary was his wife, which she wasn't.
Okay.
And this allowed Mary to
This is the
get safe
father of her
passage.
child.
Yeah, this allowed Mary to get safe passage back to England, right?
Okay.
So and
They didn't have to produce marriage documents of any sort.
no, and another thing that this Imlay guy, I'm guessing he was probably like, okay, look, I'll get you out of here without your head being ripped off, and then I'm not on the line for anything regarding your baby. Because remember this.
And a man was said our baby.
Right.
Well, and this is something to remember about
A man who loved his child.
yeah,
At least.
Well, and this is
See,
something.
I disagree. I disagree.
Really?
Because I think if you're a true man, you don't have to love your child.
Yeah.
The obligation is to take care of your child.
It's a duty.
I think you should love your child.
Yeah.
I think you should, but the
Yeah.
obligation and the duty of being a man
Yeah.
is to take care of your child.
Right.
And I think in modern times, especially, sorry, Shane, we're critiquing your whole paper. That's what we're
that's
doing.
fine.
So this is beautiful. There's a scene in, if you guys have ever seen a play that was turned into a movie called Fences. Have you guys seen it? It's a play.
I might
Very
have.
famous play called Fences.
I don't watch as many plays as you do.
Okay, well, I'm not a fucking thespian. I'm a fucking theater guy. All right, I just have seen one or two. I've seen Cats too.
Yeah.
I've honestly never seen that.
That actually shocks me since you're such a big cat guy.
I'm not a cat guy.
Yeah, he owns a cat.
No, I do not own a cat.
You own some kind of rodent thing that sits over there, fur on it.
I do not own any cats.
Okay. Anyways, a phenomenal actor. You guys might know the name. His name's Denzel Washington. Plays a character in this movie, which is of a play called Fences.
I thought you said it was a play.
I just fucking clarified that. You just heard me say a movie of the play Fences. Yeah, drink some more bourbon. That's what you need. He says it. He has they're having a conversation with the son, and his son goes, well, don't you love me? Because he was kind of being hard on him, right? He was being a little dropping the hammer like dads have to do sometimes. Yeah. And he goes, love you. And he kind of laughs.
Oh, yes.
And he looks at his son and he goes, love has nothing to do. And I'm paraphrasing here. I'm going to butcher this.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
He goes,
Yep.
I don't need to love you.
Right.
I have an obligation to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
I have an obligation to you.
Yeah.
And I think men, and when I say men, because I clear. So as you guys all know, I'm an entrepreneur and I have a brand and it's called The Rejected Gentleman. And I break it down to this. there's boys. Everyone's born, right? And if you are of the male sex, you are a boy. And then you become, you can go into teenage years, but then you become what is considered a male of age, which is 18. Notice I said a boy and then male of age. You are just a male that is older. You're just an older boy. We're just distinguishing between someone who's under 18 and someone that is over 18.
There's a need for some rite of passage.
Correct. You are a boy, and then you are a male of age. And then, if you earn it, you become a man. And that's what a man is. A man meets his obligations, his duties. You have duties. You have obligations. You don't need to want to do something. You don't need to love. You don't need to do anything. You do it because you have an obligation to do it. That's a man. So that's earned. Just because you're a male that's 30 does not make you a man. You earn manhood. And then after manhood, there's a very, very small niche of people. And you become what is called a gentleman. And a gentleman is a man that has become above. He has separated himself from society, and he's become the gentleman. He is what all men should hope to become. And then my whole brand is what I've kind of played into it is called the rejected gentleman. And it's a step further. It is no longer acceptable in society to be a true gentleman. What we consider a gentleman. So you have boy, you have a male of age, you have a man, then you have a gentleman. 4 steps. And then I argue with my brand that you are a rejected gentleman. And it goes to the days of old. Where you have met the qualifications of being a true man and a gentleman beyond repute. I'm not saying you don't have faults. I'm saying that you meet your things on and you own them, whether you have faults or not.
Take accountability.
And the whole point of this, like you said, well, he should love them. He should. He doesn't have to, but he does have an obligation to take care of those obligations. That's my whole point on that. So sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. So go ahead.
So basically, she ended up returning back to England as a single mom, right? And I don't think she ever encountered that Imlay dude again. He probably just stayed in France or ended up going back to America, whatever. Next, she ends up back in England, and then she ends up meeting a guy named William Godwin. Now, let me explain some stuff about William Godwin. William Godwin was originally raised a Calvinist, and he had actually desired to be a minister, and flirted with Unitarianism. He flirted with Unitarian-related philosophies, became a deist. Then he actually became an atheist by the year 1787. So William Godwin, we're dealing with kind of like a very like modern. A very modern atheist kind of a mind that maybe we that would be more recognizable to people like us living in 21st century America. The fact that a lot of the academic and expert class would kind of view the world the same way that William Godwin would, So,
real quick, do you like cinnamon in your tea? I'm gonna make tea instead of coffee. You like cinnamon or no?
I do like cinnamon.
Okay.
Yes.
So next. So fascinated by magic and the occult, William Godwin wrote on the subject because he was interested in immortality. So Godwin was interested in finding like an elixir of life. He was interested, being an atheist, he was basically kind of like looking for proof of anything being real beyond what can be perceived immediately by the 5 senses.
Okay, now I gotta say, Shane, I'm also interested in the elixir of immortality.
Me too.
Okay, I just want to make sure that like that's not, Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
So Godwin was a radical Enlightenment philosopher, right?
Okay.
He rejected faith in he rejected faith in favor of reason and experience.
Okay.
He clung to a philosophical view called empiricism. right? And
Okay.
we kind
We
of touched
talked
on
about
that
that.
earlier.
Yep.
And empiricism is an epistemological view which holds that true knowledge or justification comes only or primarily from sensory experience and empirical evidence.
Okay.
You know, so basically, an empiricist would say the only way that they can know something as a fact is if they can perceive it through their senses directly, right? So he was also an advocate for the abolition of property rights, marriage, and is what we would call a proto-Marxist. You know,
Okay.
because he wanted to abolish property rights and all that kind
Wasn't
of stuff.
he also an anarchist?
Oh yeah.
An anarchist?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. A left-wing anarchist.
Yeah.
Now,
Okay.
so this brings us to kind of the final leg of the story of Mary Wollstonecraft, and then we'll start really diving. We'll start really analyzing this stuff.
Okay.
So by far, Mary's most famous book was called The Vindication of the Rights of Women. You know,
Okay.
this would be equivalent to Karl Marx's book, The Communist Manifesto, which kind of like summarizes his stance on his theory of everything. So Mary Wollstonecraft's kind of theory of everything would be the vindication of the rights of women. Her book is very wordy and long-winded. It argues three main points.
No shock there.
One, that so these are the three main points of the book. One is that equality must reign in society. So society must be reorganized and subverted. Right?
Okay.
So she holds to this idea, to this axiom that equality is the end all be all of everything.
Okay.
The second kind of like core tenet of her book is that we must change women's education, that we must kind of like level the playing field and make education as available to women as it was to men.
Okay.
I don't disagree with that.
I mean,
All three of us,
So-
I think would agree at that point,
So
right?
for the first time tonight that I can recall, I don't disagree with that at all.
yeah.
and then
Some women are not meant to have children. They are meant to. There's nothing wrong with that. So her two pillars of her book, according to Shane, which I have to take you at your word, so
Right.
I'm going to take it at 100% factual.
you have faith.
Holy shit, I hate this, actually.
You do.
I almost want to recant my whole sentence, but I'm going to do it. I'm gonna draw my line in the sand again. Her second pillar, I have no problem with that. I think
Right.
that women should have 100% the access to knowledge that men have. So yeah, I agree with her second pillar.
Right.
So now the kind of like third plank of her book is
I thought you said there's
that-
two.
No, I said three. Is what it means to be a female must be
it.
redefined, and that it is critical to separate gender from sex.
Okay, disagree with the third pillar.
Right.
Yep.
Now,
One
so
for three.
so you see, this is where you start to get into kind of the that Matt Walsh documentary, What is a Woman? You know, you start to kind of get into the territory that he visits in his documentary, which is basically, because of this third plank of Mary Wollstonecraft's book, nobody can define what a woman is,
Right.
right? Or at least they can't do it in a coherent way. Now this is here. I've only got a little bit, and then we'll.
We'll free ball.
Now, Mary Wollstonecraft, being kind of an Enlightenment woman of her time, she was a bigot, right?
A racist?
She was an anti-Catholic. She hated Catholics. She hated the Catholic Church, and she actually believed that that one of the ways to achieve
not
freedom in
surprised.
society would be to destroy Catholicism, right?
Because of its patriarchy.
Yeah, it's a patriarchy.
Yeah. She viewed it as being
So
patriarchal.
I imagine she ain't like our Orthodox brothers either.
She probably didn't even know. She didn't probably at that day and time there were probably no Orthodox in England, so she probably didn't even know that they existed.
How the fuck would there not be Orthodox in England? They said it's French Revolution.
Well, she wasn't very well educated, except for being able to go and read Mr. Clare's books.
So you're making a line and saying
Right.
that she's dumb.
I'm not saying that.
You kind of did.
You might be saying that by implication, and I'm not going to correct you on it, but
Well, I could
I'll
have
say
swore
it.
I read something like she wrote a book talking about Islam.
oh, I think she did.
So she was aware of like Eastern.
She may not have been aware of orthodoxy though.
All right, so I feel like you guys don't want to say these things. So Nico Galliano, she was dumb. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that, but I'm also not going to disagree with you on
No,
that.
no, I'm saying it. She's dumb.
She was. Ignorant.
I'll tweet it out later. I'm sorry. I apologize. Woohoo, show my age there. I'll
So-
X that out later.
So now the final thing I have to leave us off with are 3 quotes by a Catholic historian named Dr. Carrie Gress.
Okay.
And these 3 quotes are kind of like are things from one of her books about Mary Wollstonecraft that kind of summarize Mary Wollstonecraft's kind of positions on things.
Okay.
All right, so the first one, Dr. Carrie Gress says, while admitting bodily differences, Wollstonecraft didn't believe there were differences in virtues between the sexes. She uses virtue to mean the exercise of reason. Okay? Second quote from Dr. Carrie Gress. She begins the concept of neutering the concept of female, driving it away from the maternal, and supplies the foundation for equating men and women in a way that denies any difference between the sexes. And then the third statement by Carrie Gress about Mary Wollstonecraft is her emphasis on the female as a human creature or rational creature and not as a woman, which builds upon her idea of natural and rational equality. The capacity for motherhood in this view is somehow not essential to being a female human. The idea rests on the belief that having and raising children is what is keeping female humans from being real people. And then I'll leave you off with one final quote, which is actually by Mary Wollstonecraft herself.
Satanist.
So Mary Wollstonecraft wrote this. I do not wish women to have power over men, but over themselves.
Well, that's tough.
Straight
I
up
like
autonomy.
that. Yeah, no, I got that. Yeah.
Okay, so Nico has already said that his analysis of Mary Wollstonecraft is that she was dumb. Shannon, what is your analysis of Mary Wollstonecraft?
Not only can I clarify that? Just because I'm making such a hard stance.
Okay, and listen, please don't say anything that's going to get us banned from Rumble because I think that's going to be our last. This is our last
No.
ban.
I want to go on record. So if I'm going to make such a hard stance, it needs to be clarified.
Mm-hmm.
Not only dumb, pridefully dumb. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay.
Pridefully dumb.
Okay. It sounds like I'm trying to be a psychoanalyst or something, but I would say she had a lot of resentment.
100%.
The thing is, I'll never know that since she's dead, but it sounds like from a lot of the analysis that's been made from her work and listening to her biography, that she was maybe felt scorned.
Okay.
Okay. And, okay, you had problems in your childhood growing up, and, that all kind of was, a man was at the center of that, right? Then you had a child who was neglected by the father. That resentment is around a man, right? So I think, and then, she had sort of sympathies or, whatever towards the French Revolution, which was already, had sort of deep-seated roots in tearing down the status quo, and everything. So I think at the end of the day, she had resentment and she was looking for a way to justify that anger.
Would you go as far as to say that that's penis envy? Because I'm of the camp, which is unpopular, that an overlarge clitoris is not a dick. Large clitoris. So I would call that penis envy.
Okay.
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 Where do you guys on that?
This is a little
I
bit.
left you guys speechless.
Okay, no. Okay, listen. This is a little bit. This is okay. My question to you is, now this is something I genuinely do not remember. Aren't that part that you were talking about?
Which part?
The clitoris.
Right.
Isn't that part in
Don't say it so shyly, Shane. It's a medical part.
Isn't that clitoris in hyenas, in female hyenas, larger than the penis in male hyenas?
Yeah, they have like a fake. What is it called? Like
a phantom dick.
Yeah, something like that.
I think that's a medical term for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
A phantom penis. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a term for like what hyenas have, and like in the females, I forget.
Are they the only animal that has that?
A decoy penis.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
And hyenas actually
No, that's why hyenas chuckle, because they laugh because they know it's not true. But they laugh at it. You know what I mean? They're like, ah!
Well, you know what's crazy? The thing is that with hyenas, the female is the leader of their groups,
That's true.
right?
And that's why if you look at where they're at, which is hyenas are in Africa, right? Mm-hmm. That's why you never hear hyenas, queen of the jungle. You never heard that shit.
Right.
But you know what you do hear? King of the jungle.
Right.
And that's a lion.
Right. Which is their biggest, that is their greatest, the greatest rival to a lion is a hyena and vice versa.
Correct. So you
They
see
hate each other.
One's ran by a patriarchy.
Right.
He's the king of the jungle.
Yeah.
And then hyenas is a matriarchy.
Right.
And no one fucking talks about him.
Man.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody really likes hyenas.
No one.
Like,
I don't think.
nobody.
I don't think
you're
hyenas
saying-
like hyenas.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, I think they're pretty much like the
We've all
bottom
seen
of the
Lion
barrel.
King. I mean, come
right.
on, yeah.
Yeah.
They were even working for a lion.
Yeah,
Yeah,
correct.
weren't
they? Yes.
Because it's the natural order of things.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so
I'm pretty sure that I will be hated by every woman after this podcast. But
Brother.
if they actually listen to me, all I'm trying to say is that there are, and this is all I'm really trying to say. I made tons of jokes today. I know they're all going to be taken out of context. They are tongue in cheek. I'm going for shock value.
It's
At
funny.
the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is that men are men and women are women,
Yeah.
and we're different.
Yeah.
One's not better than the other.
Right.
They are different.
Right. They're both made in the image of God.
And they are
but they're different.
strongest.
Yeah.
Men are men, women are women. 100% different. 100% different. And they are strongest when they are together. A man by himself and a woman by himself are not as strong as a man and woman that are in unity.
Right.
They complement each other.
Right.
They are a whole.
Yeah.
And it is the closest you can get
Yeah.
to God.
Yeah.
And that is my only thing. I've said a lot of things jokingly for shock value.
Can I say this real
Yeah.
quick? I think so. There's a guy named, I forget what his name. His name is I forget. But he wrote a book back in the day, and he said like, men stop running in packs when they have something to live for, which is a wife and children.
Think about when you think about when you spend less time with your boys.
Yeah.
Your greatest days, right? Think about it. From the age of running around on bicycles to those teenage years where you
Right.
guys are doing underage drinking and,
Right.
and trying to find out your morality and how
Right.
far you can push the rules
Right.
and going through all the chemicals flooding through your body
Right.
and then becoming a young man and then becoming a man or a male of age and trying to figure it out. And then what do you do next? you get a job,
Right.
you get that higher education,
Yeah.
and then what's the first thing you do? You seek out a woman,
Right.
and you have a child with her. You
Right.
get married to her. You become one with her.
Right.
And what's the first thing that's sacrificed naturally? Your boys. You don't
Right.
run in a
Yep.
pack anymore.
Yep.
You become a leader.
Yep.
It's natural.
Yep.
You just nailed it on the head, my
Yeah.
brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You stop running in a pack of, like there used to, remember when we were young and we'd hang out in the 24-hour Walmart parking lot and there'd be 9 of us, right? And then over time, you and I even, right? You're my brother. We see less and less of each other, and that's okay because we have obligations. We have stuff like this.
Yeah.
We still love each other. I'd take a bullet for this guy, right? Less time than when we were both in our teens and early 20s because it's natural.
Yeah.
And then your obligation is to your wife, to your
Right.
children.
Right.
You become instead of a pack, you become a leader. You're expected to lead. The decisions become to you, the responsibility and the consequences. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
My main criticism
Yeah.
of feminism and Mary Wollstonecraft is that
You're dumb.
what?
You're dumb.
Well, I mean, the reason that I would say that I would affirm that statement that you just made
What statement?
is that
What statement?
it's dumb.
What was done?
That Mary Wollstonecraft's philosophy
Was what?
dumb.
Clip it.
The whole so what I would say is this. I think when you get down to the core of it, with Mary Wollstonecraft, you can see it in her personal life. You can see it in the successive generations of feminists down the road. It's this, and I think it's something we're not even aware of in our world today. It's the normalization of trauma, of the trauma.
Yes.
It's this whole idea that if a woman has a child, or even let's say a father has a child, that their responsibility ultimately is to themselves and not to the child. Or let's say that you have other people that are truly relying on you in society, people around you that are in your circle that you care about, that care about you. What this whole philosophy that really begins with Mary Wollstonecraft and Marxism and all this other kind of stuff is that what they say is the natural order of things is for us to be traumatized and to traumatize one another. And in many ways, that's very much like the class theory of Marxism, which says that humans are a part of different classes in society, and that you basically have two different classes in any situation. You have the exploiter class, and then you have the exploited class. And the thing is that's all anti-Christian. It's completely anti-Christian because what the entire Christian notion is, that the reason that we're here is to love one another, is to will the good of each other.
Yes.
And the thing is what this philosophy of Mary Wollstonecraft says, and the philosophy of all the different forms of Marxism, like fundamentalist Marxism, directly from Marx, or even like Maoist, more cultural Marxism. What it all says is that exploitation and traumatization, it's all normal. That this is the way things should be, because this is the way things are. This is normal. And the thing is, Mary Wollstonecraft being treated like shit by her dad and by her mom, and then going out and getting knocked up by that Imlay guy and him abandoning her, and her going out and getting knocked up by that William Godwin guy and everything. This is not normal.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's almost like this weird ideology that would end up morphing into what we would call feminism. It's this idea that just elevating personal pleasure over any other possible duty or virtue or moral is superior. And that, I think, is what we must categorically reject, criticize, and say is inherently evil.
Yeah, I think it's there's been a justification more than anything for what they've tried to justify what they believe as far as feminism goes. You know what I'm saying? And then that has been sort of enshrined, because if you look at it, man, like with feminism, that has become sort of, a whole subject within itself. I mean, we're sitting here talking about it right now.
Yeah.
That just lets you know how enshrined it has become in academia, in the legal system, in politics, in economics, and in culture. And, I'm not saying that men shouldn't listen to the concerns of women, right? But I think it has, Shane, you talk a lot about like a pendulum shift. You know what I mean? Where like there's just this like extremes. You go to these extremes. And I think for a long time, the ideology of feminism, the philosophy behind it, has taken on, it's not just an idea anymore. It's a reality.
Yeah.
Right? In every facet of life.
Can I?
Yeah.
I want to say one thing on that. I don't necessarily think that there's some great egalitarian effort by men that have the stance on feminism and supporting it, right? I truly do not believe that men sit around one day in this, like I said, this great egalitarian thing and been like, oh, yes, we hear you. This makes so much sense.
Yeah.
I think that their stance is inherently at the most animalistic, Darwinistic nature. It's an easier access to pussy without commitment.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with
And
that.
I know I'm being like, I'm shooting shots today.
But think about it. Like, it's what I go back to when I said, who are the ones that are able to monopolize that?
Yes.
It's wealthy men.
Yeah.
So what do? They're able to trump.
I'm going to coin that,
I wasn't trying to,
Trump.
no pun intended. Okay. But
Take it how you can take it however you want.
They're able to basically suppress or stamp out their competition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they want it that way.
Pointing that. An easier access to pussy without commitment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Think about it.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're like, I can have it.
Right.
And I don't have to commit to it because they don't even want it.
Right.
They don't even want me to commit to
Right.
it.
Right.
That's all it is.
Right.
You have to take no responsibility.
Right.
I don't have to provide for this
Except
person.
for the men that don't have money.
Correct.
Right.
Because if you're a man without money, guess what? If you leave, what do I get to do?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he's not taking care of his child.
But guess what? They depend on those things, as Shane pointed out earlier. Those laws have to be set through governmental legislation and not through a morality and religious law.
Yep.
It's set through this law that you have to meet these obligations because you decided to not commit and go put your willy where, willy-nilly, put the willy.
Yep.
Instead of over here, where, dude, I'm coining all kinds of shit
but
today.
it's true.
Willy-nilly, put the willy. Instead of over here, I'm going to commit because I have an obligation.
Right.
If I'm going to have these pleasures and I'm going to procreate and I'm going to have these things, it's more on this side where I hold myself to these standards because it was bestowed upon me by a higher authority.
Right. It's enforced.
It all connects. And that's all I'm saying is that these guys that act so high and mighty, that they're so highbrow, they're so sophisticated, they're such intellectuals, all they're doing is they're such fucking non-masculine men, by the way.
Yeah.
They're the most limp wrist, pussy-ish guys you've ever met. Because they think that if they're nice enough, or if they fall into these, oh, yes, let these women walk over, which these women don't respect these guys. They never have, they never will. I don't care what the fuck they say, right? They think it's an easy access to have sex.
Yeah.
That's all it is. They think, oh, maybe she'll throw me a piece if I just entertain this
Which will
asinine
never
idea.
happen.
Never. And even if they do get him a piece, these women are going to walk away in a heartbeat. These guys are fucking clowns. It's like if Ronald McDonald got a free piece of poutine thrown at him. You're still a fucking clown at the end of the day. These women don't respect you. You're a fucking Hong Kong Bigfoot fuck. That's all you are. And they don't even realize what they're doing to themselves. And the women will never respect these guys. They'll walk right over them because naturally women want to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's women are women, men are men. And these women will never respect these fucking clowns.
Yeah.
That's my whole point. That's my line in the sand. And yes, I'm throwing shade again.
Well, I think, and I think the way that men, my whole thing is the way that if men want to avoid these problems, I think the only thing that they can do is turn to a religious perspective, which is,
No, wait, no. Go ahead.
Oh shit.
He's old. Hey, go.
Here, we need to open the door.
No, you guys are good. Keep talking.
Okay.
You want me to open it?
Yeah. Come on, outside.
And the interesting thing, Shannon, is that a lot of men are turning to religious perspective.
Yes, they are. But I'm speaking of the men that have already sort of been dealt sort of the death blow, right? That they had children with women who they thought that they really wanted to be with or whatever, or maybe they didn't want to be with that woman, but they stuck with her and everything, right? And then the woman has an opportunity or the ability through the legal system and through many other means to sort of castigate that man. You know what I'm saying?
I'm gonna step off for a minute.
Okay.
Sure.
She can walk away from the relationship. If a man chooses to walk away from a relationship after he's already sort of been seen as to commit to a relationship because he had children with this woman, he's been living with this woman or whatever, his life can be ruined. You know what I'm saying? And that seems not to reign true for a woman, because a woman, again, can have that sort of justification of resentment. That I'm not happy in this relationship. I'm being subjugated. I'm being whatever. You know what I'm saying? And I can sort of make up anything. I'm and I think we talked about this before, man. And I'm just going to end with this, because people try to make it this whole thing of like the Bible and the New Testament and what Paul says about, I think he says it in Ephesians, where, men are to sacrifice, you know what I'm saying, and be willing to lay down their lives for their wives as Christ, loved and was willing to lay his life down for the church, right? A lot of times women and even some men will leave that whole part of the gospel, the whole teaching out, right? Insofar as to critique Paul when he says women are to be submissive to their husbands and be humble, and respect their husbands and be humble, right? And the reason why I think Paul talks in that way is that he's trying to speak in terms that doesn't create rivalry, right? You can't have two people in the same house having the same role, right? Because that becomes, seen as competition. You're acting like another man in this relationship, and now I have to compete with you like a man. If that's what I wanted, I would just compete with a man.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I think it really boils down to taking that whole perspective seriously. Now, you may not agree with it, and there might be reasons why you don't agree with it and stuff like that. But the fact that we can't even talk about this as a real thing, like that teaching as having some real implications and weight, people, our society, especially in the West, we consider that to be like primitive almost, or like, that's old shit. You know what I'm saying? Ain't nobody want to believe that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it's like, I think no other culture wouldn't even, I'll put it like this. Other religions don't even talk in a way where the man is supposed to be loving and sacrificial for his wife.
Right.
You understand? They will tell a woman, that is your husband, and he's the head, and that's it. And you just hush your mouth, right? Because that is the role, right? But with Paul, he's giving reasons, and he's telling men, like, you need to be patient with your wife. You need to love her. You need to be sacrificial. He talks about like being long suffering, and stuff like that. I mean, that is. And you talk about laying your life down for your wife, that it carries, and I've said this before, man, that carries a lot of weight. You're telling a man that he has to be willing to give up his own life.
Yeah.
But some women and some men think that it is atrocious for a man to tell a woman, you should be humble and submissive and respect your husband. Now, tell me which one is more costly. Me losing my life or you being humble?
So this is the interesting thing to me. You mentioned that the Christian tradition it is the one that we would argue is the most complete, or that. And I'm not saying it is the most complete in the sense that we're picking and choosing which one sounds the most reasonable, right? But it's the thing that speaks the most clearly and accurately to the human condition. So this is the interesting thing when you go back to the book of Genesis and you look at the fall. Oh, hey buddy, hey, you gotta go back out there. Hang on, people. Hey, yo. Hey, you gotta go. Go. All right, whatever.
Yeah, he's like, no.
Okay. All right. So when we're looking at the book of Genesis, so this is right after the fall, right? Mm-hmm. So remember that the serpent tempted Eve, right? And Eve ended up falling, which ended up leading to a whole cataclysm that
we're living with now.
That forever, that brought the disease of sin.
Yeah.
Sin and death and the devil.
You know what else?
Into reigning over humanity.
You know what else it did, Shane?
What?
It brought them ugly fucking bats into existence.
It did. Yes.
Okay.
And they're everywhere now.
They're disgusting.
And we're not talking about people. We're talking about the actual animals.
Yeah.
The little winged rats. So now pay very careful attention. I'm going to go ahead and read the curses that God places over the woman, over the man, and over the serpent.
Yeah.
So I'll start with the woman. So what we'll actually here what I'll say is you know what? Actually, here I'm going to start with the serpent.
Okay.
So, the Lord God said to the serpent, "Because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock, and above all beasts of the field. On your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring, and he shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. Okay, so that's that statement to the serpent. And for anybody that didn't pick up on that, that is a direct prophecy of the Blessed Mother giving birth to the Messiah, who would end up destroying the serpent. Okay, next, the curse over the woman, basically the curse over Eve. And this is really a curse over all women, right? To the woman, he said, I will surely multiply your pain in childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you.
So wait, let me stop you there. So say that again, because I want to point out the fact that maybe then that means
the whole thing, or just the second part?
No, just the second part, because that means that it wasn't that way before.
Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you.
And he shall rule over you. So that means if God is saying that as a sort of implication for what they did, then it must have meant that it might not have been like that in the beginning.
Well, and you know, and this is the thing. What if you know how Jesus says that the greatest in the kingdom shall be that the first shall be last and the last shall be first? Well, you know, the thing is, prior to the garden, ultimately God's law, God is love.
Yes.
And that ultimately is God's law. And so in this world where humans build all these artificial like power constructs, he basically says, and listen, I'm not a theologian, okay? Even Nico is not a theologian.
Yeah. I am, in fact, a theologian.
Well, even you are not a theologian, and Nico's known to be deceitful sometimes.
Jesus,
especially in this moment. But so the really interesting thing here is that it says here, your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. Yeah, so like it's almost like in the pre-fall situation that the husband would just be looking out for her, and she would steward. That implicitly there would be a trust that she would have in her husband that would just be natural, and that implicitly there would be a natural looking out for her by her husband. That would be the natural order of things. But then in the post-fall world, where everything is all topsy-turvy and upside down, then this is something that actually becomes kind of like a curse.
Yeah.
This becomes kind of like a demand.
I don't think it's a curse. Man was made in God's image, and God rules over us through love. I think we're supposed to rule over women not tyrannically,
right,
but through love. And I don't think you got to be a tyrant to rule.
Right.
So when we say rule, we instantly think of a strong suppressor. Power suppression, all these things. That's not true.
Right.
Just as God rules over man,
right,
man's supposed to rule over woman.
Right.
It's supposed to be through love and understanding and caring and protection, the same way God does to us, because we're made in God's image.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Well, and so now the final one, and to Adam, God said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall be. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you. You shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. So, long story short, there's a lot more there than there was in the command to the woman.
Yeah.
But you're basically dealing with the man's burden is going to be to provision resources,
right?
Essentially, and it will be painful. It's not going to be easy,
right?
And And what it says for the woman is basically that her kind of like responsibility here, her burden is going to be to bear children.
Right.
You know, that this is kind of the thing, you know, and every culture's understood this.
The sweat of the brow and
Right.
childbirth. I alluded to this earlier.
Exactly.
Yep.
And the thing is, you know, this is what the cultural Marxists and the feminists are trying to subvert. And you know, the silver lining of all of it is that the cultural Marxists, the only way for them to largely reproduce is through the university system. Right? The university system's falling apart. And it's going to continue to fall because, you know, the sentiment toward the brand of the American university 20 years ago was great. You know, people would be like, "Yeah, there are a lot of liberal professors up there that they have a lot of weird ideas, but I'm still going to send my kids there because I want my kids to have a better life." Now, the kind of like the brand perception of the university is there are a bunch of crazy liberals up there, and I don't want my kid to go there and become a crazy liberal like all the professors up there.
Well, that's done by design because you got to remember these fucking harpies can't pass through childbirth because they're not having children.
Right.
So they have to pass through indoctrination.
Yep, that's the only way they can do it.
If they're not having children, they can't pass down a history or a concept. You know what I mean? They have to do it through indoctrination of other people's children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%.
Now, okay. Now, since we're doing an Old Testament reading, let's do a New Testament reading.
Okay.
Ephesians 5:25-33 says, "Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it, that he might sanctify and cleanse it with the washing of water by the word, that he might present it to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that it should be holy and without blemish. So ought men to love their wives as their own bodies. He that loveth his wife loveth himself. For no man ever yet hated his own flesh, but nourisheth it, and cherisheth it, even as the Lord the church. For we are members of his body, of his flesh, and of his bones. For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall be joined unto his wife, and they two shall be one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and the church. Nevertheless, let every one of you in particular so love his wife, even as himself, and the wife see that she reverence her husband." Okay? So the thing about it is, everybody be trying to talk about it like it's just some kind of implication on the woman, but there is a whole damn, I mean, that's more than a paragraph of what a man is supposed to do for his wife.
Well, you know, doesn't it seem like symbolically what we could call like the Marxist or like the class conflict theorists or whatever we would want to call them. What they're doing is they're trying to wage war on Christ by trying to turn his church against him. I mean, that's essentially what they're doing. Like, you know, they're symbolically doing it because the family is supposed to be a representation. You know, the relationship within the family is supposed to be a representation of the relationship between Christ and his church, right? His, you know, that his church submits to his authority. So basically what they're doing in trying to subvert Christianity and Christian morals, Christian virtues, what they're doing is they're trying to turn the church against Christ. And the way to do that is you turn the woman against the man. You know, you make it so that she's no longer the piece of the home, but you make it so that she kind of brings the home to pieces.
The chaos.
Yeah.
Destruction.
Made for the streets.
So, okay. So,
Home. Like an
That would
alley
be bad.
cat, not a house cat.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
She don't want to take care of the hearth. She want to take care of I don't even know.
Yeah, like I said, like an alley cat, not a house
alley
cat.
cat,
You know, she's
exactly.
not pissing in the litter box. She's pissing on the carpet.
Yeah.
That ammonia smell in the house.
It's
Well-
just, you know what I'm saying? She's out of
Fucking up
control.
carpet.
You know?
So I
Scratching couches.
Man.
the I guess one of the questions I would have is when did this subversion truly begin to kind of take root?
You just read a whole fucking article.
No. So this is when the seeds were planted, right? And something that we all know is that seeds will germinate and then they'll sprout and then they'll take root, right?
The Reformation.
Okay.
I'm starting there. Some people might say the Enlightenment.
Wait, was your question, when did this actually start taking place?
When did feminism in a concrete way begin to take root in the West to the point where it was a cultural force to be reckoned with?
Oh, I got this. 100%. About the time this lady walked up the tree and picked a piece of fruit off it.
Oh, there you go. There you go. There you go. There you go. There you go.
But this is the problem, Nico, is you had Christ's work on Calvary and the establishment of his church, and you had a long period of thriving there. And then everything seemed to go to shit. So at what point do you think it all went to shit?
When
What are you talking about? You had 2 cities literally destroyed.
You're talking about Nagasaki and Hiroshima?
No, I'm not talking about Naga. What the fuck?
What other cities would you be talking about?
What biblically, what 2 cities would I be talking about that were destroyed?
Sodom and Gomorrah?
Correct.
Okay.
So what are you talking
Destroyed in a
about?
similar way.
So what are you talking about? There's always been planting of it there.
A supplanting
It always comes when men fail
I would
to
argue-
uphold their
well,
obligations.
I would argue.
I would say the
Yeah.
decision
Well,
on
think about it, Shane, though, because you talk about the Garden of Eden, right? What was Adam's role? He was to be the steward, right? So
it's
he
when
let,
men fail their job.
Yeah.
Yeah, but okay, so
but he did tell her. He did tell God. He said that woman you. He said that woman you gave me.
Yeah. This is how I imagine it.
He was trying to supplant.
Okay,
he was
but
trying to
Hold
take,
on,
not
hold
take
on.
accountability.
No, this is how I imagine it.
but
Adam's sitting
look-
against a tree, right? He's sitting against a tree. He's sitting there. He's like, okay, that long neck motherfucker over there, that's going to be a giraffe.
Right.
Right?
He was in
That
there.
horn thing over there,
But-
that's going to be an ox, right? And then she goes, oh, you look very hungry. You've been working so hard naming all these animals. She's like, eat this. And he's like, oh, thank you, darling. I appreciate it.
darling.
And he's like, I've never had this before. What is this? This is very sweet. She's like, it's new. And he's like, you bitch. This is
Well,
that
okay,
one fruit we're
we're-
not supposed to eat,
listen,
right?
fuck.
That's about where it started.
so
He's
my
like, are we naked?
And they
Yeah.
started hiding.
Are we
they
fucking
started
naked
hiding.
right
Remember?
now?
but
Are we like,
God came in the coolness of the day.
yes,
Yeah.
but so this is the thing that happened. But then Christ's work on Calvary happened, right?
Right.
And,
Redemption.
and things things were, put on a better, let's say, put on the right track, right? Through the authority of his church.
Yes.
And then things seem to kind of fall off the rails again. So
Well,
so my question is, when did things start to fall off the rails again? Like at what point? What historical event or events or time period can we point to say that is when things started to fall off the rails again?
Perhaps there isn't one. I think
again, you're saying again. So it already
Yeah.
happened once.
Yeah.
You're acting like it didn't happen once. You can't say the word again and then act like what was the before.
Well, it
okay.
did happen before.
Yeah.
And then it was put back on the right track, and then
Right.
it got taken off the
So,
right
so
track.
it's naturally always there.
Well, okay, so that's what it leads to, right? It leads to this thing of a choice. Mankind has a choice. We have a choice to be redeemed, or we have the choice to continue to live in the fallen state. We can either choose to live in that fallen state of our father and mother, Adam and Eve, or we can choose to be redeemed by Christ, right? And because of God's love, you know what I'm saying? And we sitting up here talking theologically. I'm not trying to do that. And I know there's people that can do that, way better. But the thing is that,
What do you mean?
the thing is that, I think it really boils down to, it's not so much of being able to pinpoint when there was a time, more in so much of it's more about a choice. Which one do we choose? Which one? And maybe that's, and people say, well, that's an individual choice or it's a collective choice, but it's a choice.
But okay. So my question is, why is it that it seems like for a long time the correct choices were being made on a large scale, and then all of a sudden it just kind of seems like the wrong choices were suddenly started being made. That there was the momentum shifted from the momentum having been, okay, we're gonna largely orient ourselves toward making the right decisions. And then the momentum shifted the opposite direction.
Because you had deviant, degenerate, European bourgeois men, right? Not nobles.
So
no, let me tell you. These were not these men who were writing these little pamphlets and writing these books and
funding
stuff,
them too.
Right. They were not nobles. They were not rich. They were not aristocrats. They were bourgeois. So they were educated. They could read and write and stuff. That they were going to universities and getting educated, but they were envious and had a lot of animosity towards nobility. Right? They hated them because they didn't come from noble families. Okay. Right? They weren't the Medicis.
It sounds like you.
It's you. That's definitely you.
They weren't the Kennedys. They weren't the
Gallianos.
Gallianos.
It means rooster murderer in a.
Okay. It doesn't mean rooster
Italian,
murderer. It just means rooster.
Okay.
It's a phallic symbol for our big cocks.
Okay. They weren't them, right? So, in their mind, it's like, if I can't be like them, if I can't join them, I'm gonna beat them, right? How do I beat them? I subvert. Right? So they're playing the same role that Satan is playing. If I can't be God, or if I can't be, whatever, then I'm going to fuck up the whole program. Well, and I think that's what them people like Rousseau, that degenerate motherfucker.
You're casting shade. You're doing shade.
I'm doing that.
He's coming. Yeah, I knew I'd convert you guys.
That,
shady.
Voltaire was a degenerate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Those were degenerates, bro.
100%.
Where's your shade? Throw some shade. Throw some shade.
And they
name someone. Name someone.
The Marquis de Sade.
Okay.
Oh, dude, you're such
there you
a
go.
Pussy.
They hated the French nobility. You know what I'm saying? They hated the fact that these people were whatever. And maybe they had good reasons too. Maybe they were like, I didn't get two breadsticks. Why does this motherfucker get two breadsticks? I get half a breadstick and he get two breadsticks. That's not fair. So I'm upset and angry, right?
Yeah.
So they want to tear up everything. Martin Luther. Hey, I'm not going to call him a degenerate, but what he did set the whole tone for the Western world.
Yeah.
And he caused a lot of chaos. And that motherfucker's dead, chilling. Okay. Calvin is another one.
Ciao.
Okay. You know what I'm saying?
Juan Calvin.
Yeah.
Juan
Calvin.
Juan Calvin.
Yeah, Juan Calvin.
Zwingli.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm coming for them all. Who's that motherfucker that was the king of England? Who killed like all his wives?
Henry VIII?
Henry
the Eighth.
Yeah.
Degenerate.
Yeah.
His first wife, Catherine of Spain, though. She's a Catholic.
Yes.
And he was a Catholic at that time.
At that time.
And she wouldn't let him get away with that shit. And neither would the church.
Yeah.
They said, you're not marrying no more women, boy. Sit your ass down.
Badass down.
And pray. You know what I'm saying? You need to sit on down. That's enough.
And the interesting thing about Henry VIII is he had just written a defense
Yeah.
of the Catholic faith against Martin Luther.
Yeah.
before, right before he ended up,
He was a contender to be one of the Holy Roman emperors.
Yes. He was thinking properly with his mind.
Right.
But then he started thinking with his...
Because he didn't get his way.
Wait, I don't know what he was thinking. What was that?
With his not mind.
I don't know what the fuck
His
that
other
means.
mind.
Yeah.
What is
with
that?
His other head.
What are you guys talking
His
about?
other head.
What's the other head? Is that like a metaphor?
Yes. It is a metaphor.
Wiener.
Yeah, and the thing is, ultimately, I think that
I'm telling you, bro, ultimately, these people were upset. And they had great resentment for the people that they could not be like.
Some of the people you're naming were very... I mean, Henry VIII was a very powerful man.
Yeah.
What was his resentment towards?
His resentment was because he couldn't do what he wanted to do. He wanted sons. What was his wife's name? Catherine. She couldn't give him one.
Gave him a daughter.
Gave him a daughter. That wasn't good enough for him. So he was like, well, and on two, another thing is that I think Henry maybe had animosities towards the Spanish too. Like, they're powerful. They're running around the seas and stuff. I don't get to make my own decision. I've kind of got to play into her hand because she comes from the house of Aragon?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Everybody always has beef with the Spanish.
Right. They're way more powerful than my little island.
Yep.
It's funny because they mostly use pork.
You know what I'm saying? Who and what was England called? Mary's dowry.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? But Spain was called España.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, we are powerful. We'll kick your ass.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Maybe he didn't like that. Maybe he's like, I'm tired of these fucking Spaniards. They keep running shit. I wanna be able to tell my wife what to do. Why she got to tell me what to do? She got more money than me. She got more power than me because she's got this whole family back over there that's like ruining my fucking life. You know what I'm saying? So maybe he was getting angry. So he's like, I'm gonna marry an English bitch. Sorry, I didn't mean to say bitch, but I'm gonna marry an English woman. And that'll make it all better for me.
I thought you were going to say that you didn't mean to say English.
And then he married a German and then a French. He married a lot of them.
So I think these guys, man, they were resentful. They were resentful. They were envious. They were upset about the fact that they couldn't live a noble lifestyle. And so they were looking for any way to subvert. And who do you get to subvert that shit? People who don't know how to read or write. People who are laboring all their lives. Those are people who are not bourgeoisie, right? Those are the workers.
Yeah.
They couldn't get the nobles to turn.
Yeah.
So you get the people that, you tell them, look, hey, man, you've been working all your life. You broke your back. How many of your fathers done died serving this king, producing bread? Ain't you tired of that? You should be so mad and upset that your life is like this.
And they're like, you should be your own king.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
I like that, yeah.
Yeah.
You should be your own, whatever. And I say this about, and I know some people going to get upset about this, but I'm going to say it anyways.
Calm yourself down.
Yeah.
The Haitian Revolution.
Oh, yeah.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay? I think
Haitian Nation, baby.
I love the Haitians.
Yeah.
Beautiful people.
Play soccer with them.
Yeah.
I love Creole. You know what I'm saying? But I think that revolution happened the same way. Them mixed babies started getting upset because they weren't getting land from their white father, right? The mulatto baby said, you know what? Fuck this. You bring your son from France over here to rule the plantation, and I've been helping you this whole time. I'm gonna fuck your whole shit up.
So guess what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go over and talk to these slaves over here and tell them, hey, ain't you tired of working for these people? Aren't you sick and tired of slaving away, breaking your back for these people? You should revolt.
100%.
Now, I'm not saying that they didn't have reason to do it, but it's a little manipulative, don't you think?
Yeah.
A little manipulative.
Well, and ain't that the way it always goes? It's one powerful faction manipulating the those that are dispossessed of power, manipulating them to go and rise up so that they can overthrow the faction that's in power, so that the rival faction can step in.
There you go. And what did Satan do?
Same thing. Yeah.
He was angry with God.
Yeah.
Right? Now, that's not I don't know if that's in the Bible or whatever, right? But isn't there somewhere where it talks about how Satan was angry with God or something like that because he created man and he loved man a lot and stuff like that, and then Satan got upset and he got a whole host of angels to revolt against God, and then
the 1/3 of angels that were were
cast out of heaven.
No, it was the 1/3 of angels that were allotted to Jesus.
Okay,
so 1/3.
That's St. Thomas Aquinas's theory.
Okay,
I thought we were all Catholic.
Yeah. No. But the thing is, that is not. There's nothing binding.
You're saying that's his idea.
Yeah. There's no. Now, it's probable, but there's nothing saying that you're bound to believe it or that it's absolutely true.
Yeah, I'm just saying that.
Thanks for pointing that out, Shane. That had nothing to do with my fucking. What are you doing here, dude? What are you, a fucking asterisk? You're like a living, breathing fucking asterisk. Can I make my fucking point?
Listen.
What do you?
If I'm going to be a grammatical symbol, I'm going to want to be a comma.
Dude, I don't know. You're
a comma.
You just be a fucking T symbol for twat. Can I finish my fucking point?
I want to be a question mark.
Dude,
yes.
Fuck, dude. I don't even know what the fuck I was saying now.
So I was saying
you were talking about like asterisks, and I think you might have even thrown in semicolons and stuff too.
Dude, no one gave a fuck. I was trying to make a point, and you're like, oh,
you're sitting over,
technically that's
you're sitting over here like the damn Riddler.
Dude, I was just trying to fucking make a point because he said something, and he was like, I don't think it was said in the Bible, so he preluded to that, and I was like, oh yes, you're correct. It was not said in the Bible, but here's what you're referring to, and you're like, huh. You don't actually have to adhere to that because those are just St. Thomas Aquinas. It's entertaining reading, but fuck past that. Who knows?
I never said that. No.
Can we have a fucking conversation like people? Dude, you are like an asterisk.
No.
See the footnotes to know that you don't have to actually give a fuck. Like, what are you doing?
You're like a semicolon because nobody actually knows what that does.
Dude, you're like a fucking comma. There's just too many of you, and are they actually practical?
What? I didn't even catch that.
Yeah, exactly. That's what a comma does. Wow. You're like a fucking break in a sentence. No one needed it. We all know that there's.
Are you talking about the brackets?
No, dude, a fucking comma.
No, you know what? You are a bracket symbol.
Well, let me allow.
Nobody even knows what that does. Nobody even understands.
Allow me to be a period.
Okay.
And I'm gonna finish my conversation.
Okay.
Dude.
Yeah.
So
asterisk, that was not a period.
Okay. Go. All right.
But do you see my point though?
Yeah, 100%.
It's kind of like the same thing, right?
You know what he's talking about. You don't even know because
I'm just saying somebody got mad, and they got mad and they wanted.
Shane
to
doesn't know what you're talking about.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
The Haitian Revolution.
No. Well, I'm trying to say that like
the
French Revolution, the Reformation, the Haitian Revolution, the story of Adam and Eve with the snake in the garden, all allude to the same thing: resentment, anger. Right? I'm mad at the person who I thought loved me or cared about me enough to not put me in this position, and now that I'm in this position, I'm gonna go all out to destroy this person.
Well, and don't you think that the modern notion normalizing trauma that legitimizes resentment, and it sows more of it into the society, and it makes things like Marxism and feminism and all these bad isms, it gives them more traction and fuel.
Right. And now think about the law. Why does the law tend to side a lot of times with women and stuff?
They're the victim class.
And also
They're defined as a victim class.
they're defined as a victim class, and the law does not want to be on the other side of like the media. They don't want to be seen as not siding with the victim.
Right.
If they say, well, the man has the right and the man has, then guess what? Here comes the media. Oh, they gave, blah, 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 and he's abusive and he did this and, he could have been a killer. You don't know. You know what I'm saying? What if he ends up doing that? And then what? What are you going to do? You know what I'm saying? So now.
Who is that guy?
Right.
That's your
Oh,
average,
you're asking me who is that guy?
Yeah, who is that guy?
That's the journalist from New York Times.
That's a male feminist.
Like, I'm going to blow this shit up. Because I didn't get no cootie cat.
Oh.
So if I don't get no cootie cat, he don't get no cootie cat.
I might not know what the fuck's going on right now.
So basically, what I'm trying to say is, the law always sides with the victim, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Why do they side with the victim or the perceived victim? It's because they're scared of being shamed by the public.
I thought it was resentment.
Well, it is resentment.
Not being a cootie cat. No.
No, but it is resentment because the journalist is probably a guy who didn't get cootie cat when he was young.
That's true.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like you were talking about, right? Now I'm just
Was I?
riffing. You were talking about how these guys always, try to be on the side of women, and yes, we should,
Oh, easy access to pussy guys.
Yes.
Oh, the
yes.
cootie cat guys.
The cootie cat
Oh,
guy.
I'm with you now, bro.
You understand what I'm saying?
Shane's not
He's
with
the
us.
cootie cat guy.
Shane's not with us.
You spent like 30 minutes talking about this, and you're just now trying to you don't even know what's going on, dude.
Okay. Anyway, let's take it back to the resentment.
So
You
here's
didn't even take a sip. That was a fake sip. You took a fake sip.
fine. I'll take more of a
You
sip.
did a theatrical sip. You just made a sound to make it look like you took a sip. Dude, I can do that too. Watch this. You didn't do shit. Hold on, just for the audience at home. This content right here. Ready?
Bam.
You didn't do shit, dude. I just faked that shit too.
I think you just spit in there.
Wow.
I didn't do shit with it. Ready? I'll do another one.
Man.
All right, let's okay, here.
Why are you so nervous? You're making me nervous.
No.
I think it's because I said cootie cat.
Yeah.
No, it's not because she's a cootie cat.
We're running long. You cut this bitch up
Okay,
in two
listen.
podcasts.
Listen. Okay, so
Did you have a stroke?
no. I've got like 5 thoughts and I'm trying to spit out at one time.
Yeah.
So
Just spit one out.
Okay,
Okay.
so you asked the question, where does this idea of feminism and everything come from? How did this all start? I started saying it's because these bourgeoisie in the 17th century or 18th century had resentment for the aristocratic and noble classes, right? And the Reformation too, right? Martin Luther, I think, had resentment for clergy.
yeah.
Wasn't he a monk or something?
Yep. And then he decided not to be a monk anymore, and he decided that all monks are illegitimate.
Right. So how do you stir up controversy? There's obviously something that he didn't like or didn't probably get his way with something,
So earlier, I felt like you came down real hard on all the people after Martin Luther.
Yeah.
But I felt like you kind of had like a reservation to come down hard on Martin Luther himself. So I'd like to go on record right? Because
Yeah.
I'm a big record guy, and you
Yeah.
and Shane tend not to be, and that's fine.
Yeah.
I like to go on record and see if you'll join me in saying, "Fuck Martin Luther."
Fuck Martin Luther.
There it is, Shane.
Okay, and I don't mind saying
Shane,
that.
can we get a "fuck Martin Luther"?
He caused a lot of problems.
Shane,
We're not-
do it
Ma-
with us.
Ma-
You-
All right, listen, I'll agree with that. Martin Luther caused a lot of problems.
caused a lot
Can
of
we get a
problems.
"fuck Martin Luther"?
He caused a lot of problems.
Can,
I mean,
can we
okay.
do it? Can we
Okay,
get-
you know what? Fuck the problems that he caused.
Yes. Okay. Because
Dude,
okay.
you're
Think
like a
about this,
fucking
bro.
politician, dude.
Lutheranism is probably like one of the most dying Protestant denominations in the country, in the
and,
world.
And you know that this is a really interesting track. Is Protestantism is evaporating,
Yeah.
right? So the thing is, what is that world, especially in America, which kind of the founding creed of America is Protestantism.
Yeah. And
What is that world gonna look like?
And Lutheranism is
Well, actually, the young generation in droves for the longest time, and I would say the last 40 years especially, a lot of young people are going to Catholicism.
yes.
Catholicism and
orthodoxy.
orthodoxy. Yeah.
You know, I love the ortho bros.
Love
Me
the
too.
Ultra Bros.
You know, I mean, some of the shit they say, you just I
They
don't
say
understand.
crazy shit, but I just let it go.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
know, but you know, I think Protestantism is not working
Right.
because it doesn't. It's a feel good thing. You know, you were talking
Yeah,
about that
feel-good
before.
Christians.
You know what I'm saying? They do, and this goes for Black Pentecostalism too. All right, I'm tired of them too.
Oh, here it comes, dude.
Okay,
You
all
better
that
live.
clapping hands and speaking in glossolalia. Look up the word because it's a real word, and you'll know what
it
I'm
up.
talking about.
I'm not going to.
It's not. It's not. Listen, man. It's that shit. I'm not gonna say that. I'm not gonna say that. I'm gonna say
Say it.
it's tiring because it's not. You have to struggle with Christianity,
Yeah,
and it's hard to be a Christian.
very hard.
Going to church and shouting and sweating and you know playing the Hammond P3 organ, stomping,
Yeah.
playing the tambourine,
Hip shaking.
hip shaking,
That's right, bro.
tent revivals.
Pelvic thrusting. Yeah. What are we doing here? I don't know. I was trying to back you up.
I'm just saying, all that extra stuff doesn't get you when you're left at the end of the day by yourself and alone.
You ain't doing none of that shit.
You ain't doing none of that.
That's right.
You ain't doing that. You can turn on as many YouTube videos and shout your ass off as many times as you want. At the end of the day, you still got to deal with your problems,
That's right.
right? And that's the thing is that I'm just saying
What are you saying?
it's
bro?
not an efficient way to deal with salvation. I think you have to actually come to terms with the fact that, like, you know, all that worship and praise and stuff is not a way to. It's like that's a subset of the real thing, which is like turning to Christ. You know what I'm saying? Like the sacraments.
You know, I think you're absolutely right, and I think in America we have seen. I think that's one of the reasons that in America we have seen, you know, kind of the rise of all these secular institutions. You know, like I mentioned the universities earlier. You know, you've got the universities who are able to just wield power for power's sake. You know, these multinational companies that are able to just wield power for power's sake. Because I think because it kind of seems like the problem is when the religious framework, which is kind of the thing that has undergirded America since the beginning, when the religious framework ends up becoming, unfortunately, based upon feelings and emotions, and also too like the ability of a preacher to elicit certain emotions and feelings during a sermon, rather than it being about participation in the Eucharist and participation in the sacraments, you end up, I think there's almost like a bystander effect where it makes people feel like rather than being an active part of Christ's work on the planet, it's almost like they become the ultimate fanboy or the ultimate fangirl. Like,
can I see this real quick?
Yeah.
Because I want to type in. Remember, I told you about that Nigerian cardinal.
Yes.
Had the whole thing of Acts. You can keep. I'm gonna look.
But yeah. But so it just kind of seems like it creates almost like a bystander of effect where rather than being directly engaged in Christ's work on Calvary, like that affecting you and just by nature that affecting other people. And you having access to the sacraments and that not being contingent on how a choir makes you feel or how musical instruments make you feel or how a sermon makes you feel. Just the way.
No, I think Nico is done.
Yeah. No. But I so here I'll just wrap this up because I feel like I've said the same thing kind of a few times.
At least 7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've been counting. But yeah, it's just that
Dude, you are that guitar player in that church.
The acoustic.
Look at me.
No.
You are that guy.
No, that's you.
No, dude, you're doing that now.
No. But you understand what I'm saying, and I'm just building off of what Shannon said. Is that this is not something where you're just like a follower of a band. You're actually you're a part of the band. And that I think is the difference. And listen, I love our Protestant brothers and sisters, but that I think is the big difference between.
But I love them like
Protestantism,
like a cousin, not a brother. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay.
Like I look forward to seeing them at Christmas, but I'm not gonna hang with them just because it's Tuesday.
I'd still like to see them on Columbus Day.
Okay.
Why? Who the fuck would you pick Columbus Day out of all the days?
Because it's a federal holiday. But ultimately that's the thing is, I think that in true apostolic Christianity, Orthodoxy, Catholicism, you are in something real, because you have access to the sacraments,
Right.
And when you're cut off from those things, you become like a bystander, like the number one follower of a band.
Yeah.
You'll never be part of the band.
Well, this is what, and I'll just leave with this for my friend. So His Eminence Francis Arenze, who a lot of people keep getting mixed up with His Eminence Robert Serra. They're not the same people, and
That's
they
what
don't
I thought
come
you
from
were
the
talking
same
about.
country.
Yeah, that's who I thought you were talking about.
So Francis Arenze talks about this whole thing of Acts. So the Acts prayer acronym used to structure prayer, it says is not directly related to any specific Nigerian cardinal. Anyways, so Acts is the acronym for adoration, confession, thanksgiving, and supplication.
Oh yeah.
That this is the true purpose of the liturgy. It's adoration, confession, thanksgiving, and supplication. All that little extra stuff that people want to do, you know what I mean? Like I'm gonna make my debut strumming on a guitar at the mass.
Yeah.
That's out, bro. Like that's, you can do that on your own time. Go do that downstairs at the meeting hall or something.
And he says that in his speech, doesn't he?
Exactly. You want to do that at the wedding, be my guest. At the celebration, but not at the liturgy.
Yeah.
That's what the liturgy's for. And so I just think we gotta think about that, man.
Well, there was there's a famous Calvinist preacher who I believe was a Baptist named Charles Spurgeon, and Charles Spurgeon wrote a lot of books about theology and everything, and Charles Spurgeon said the height of worship is to basically like actively listen to a well articulated and biblical sermon. And the thing is, in many ways, I think that kind of reflects the fundamental error of the Enlightenment. That kind of fundamentally reflects the error of rationalism, where and unfortunately, I think a lot of it is in Protestantism. There are a lot of Catholics that are up in their heads too, but it's this idea that it's like knowledge that saves you, or like your beliefs that save you. That those are the things that save you, and in reality, the things that save you are the sacraments.
It's true,
and that's the important thing, and that's the thing is that it's not only like the immaterial, but it's the material as well, because Jesus did not come to only save your soul. If he did that, then he would not have had to be resurrected.
Right.
Now, maybe I'm wrong on that.
Yeah.
But please
Probably.
correct me please correct me in the comments. The
You're not a theologian.
No, I'm not.
But
a
I
theologian.
am. So what else did he come for?
Well, I'm not even going to speculate because I don't want to do anything that would be heretical,
Man.
But the thing is, I think I think it's very important to point that out that there is this in a lot of factions of Protestantism. There is an idea there's a way of thinking that says you're on the team if you believe the right stuff.
Yeah.
Or that you're bound for heaven if you merely believe the right stuff, that there is nothing you can physically do.
No good works.
Right. To a degree, that's true. But I think where they err is they say that it's only about what your mental assent is. And the simple fact is that the only efficacious form of worship that exists is Christ's sacrifice and his life, death, and resurrection, and the culmination of it was his enthronement on Calvary.
Right.
And that is the one and only sacrifice that is presented and represented for all of eternity. And here I'll spit out one last thing and shut up. Is I know that's going to make you happy.
Oh, dude,
But
I'm letting you cook.
The one final thing I'll say is this:
Can I have
is
some
that
more coffee, please?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Brother.
that there is I think there are two views of Christ's work on Calvary. One is that it is a historical event that is continuously happening in parallel to all other historical events. It's almost like you could think of human history as being a timeline. Actually, you could almost think about it as like two timelines. One is the current timeline that we are living in. The other is this parallel timeline that is just depicting one moment in history, and that's Calvary.
Right.
And it's Calvary trying to pour into every other piece of the timeline that we're living in. And that's all happening through the church and through the sacraments. The other way of viewing Christ's work on Calvary is to view it as being like a once and done historical event. To say what I believe to misrepresent Christ's words on Calvary, which is to say it is finished, means that moment is once and done, and that moment is almost now. Protestants would not say this, but that moment is almost irrelevant now. That moment is almost like a past transaction that has occurred, and that all you have to do to activate that transaction is to mentally ascend to the proper to the proper salvific statement.
Okay.
Rather than saying that salvation is it's a day-to-day thing.
Yes.
Are you living in sin? Are you not living in sin?
Right.
If you fall into sin, you got to go to confession.
Yeah.
And if you don't go to confession and you're living in sin, then you need to go to confession to be reconciled.
And do you see what I'm saying? That
that it's kind of like two ways of perceiving it. Is One is that it's once and done. It's in the
Right.
past, and that moment really is not. It's not continuously happening.
Right.
But the other point of view, which would be the Catholic and Orthodox, and I'm thinking maybe some traditional Lutherans and traditional Episcopalians, I'm not really sure, would view it and say that the moment of Calvary is happening in parallel to all other moments in history, and that grace is being outpoured continuously.
I think some Catholics would say it's a work towards sainthood. It's a work towards saintliness.
Yeah.
And saintliness is not easy.
No. It's
Because
not.
a lot of the saints were not saintly before they became saints.
You could even be a saint
I am.
if you were to get your act together.
Do you know what you remind me of? You remind me of a college kid that has a 10,000 word essay due, but you finished and you're at like 730. Like you have like 7,300 words, and you're like, how can I fill the rest of this shit? So you just talk in length.
Well, you remind me of a college student who had to turn in like a 10,000 word essay, and you turned
Here
in
we go with the ranks.
and you turned in a 30,000 word essay,
Yeah.
and you got an F on it because it was complete nonsense.
Oh, is that it? So I just talk shit.
Can I hit y'all with the last question I have? Whoever's gonna be the Pope, what name do you want him to have? Please tell me. I want to
Italian
know.
one.
Okay.
Yeah, we need an Italian pope again.
So like Chef Boyardee.
It's been like too long. You fucking racist piece of shit. You
Oh no. So do you want his name to be Papa John?
I wanted to be Italian. We
Because-
haven't had an Italian pope. It's been a
Because
minute.
that's an Italian name, and that's a legitimate Pope name too, isn't it?
Well, I mean, we
Technically,
had
call him Papa
wasn't-
John.
wasn't
Pope Francis was
I was
Italian.
going to say, wasn't he actually Italian just from Argentina?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Doesn't count.
It doesn't count. Didn't he
Plus,
speak Italian fluently?
Plus, I don't trust Jesuits.
They should. They're not supposed to be popes.
I'm not saying nothing about that.
Yeah, I don't trust them. Lines in the sand, brother. Throwing shade.
Do you want to know the honest name that I would like?
Yes.
Is I'd really like to see a Pope Patrick.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
after
Okay.
St. Patrick.
Well, since we're going,
Another Italian.
yes, since
No, he
we're-
was not Italian.
Another Roman.
Patrick.
St. Patrick was Roman.
Listen. This is a hotly debated topic.
Wasn't he English?
This is a hotly debated. There's a lot of. You're right. Is he English?
Yeah.
Was he Roman? Was he?
Okay.
Was he Gaelic? Was he Celtic?
Right.
Nobody really know. I mean, there's a lot of contradiction. There are a lot of questions here.
Yeah.
There's a
None
lot
of
of
that's-
debate
none of
among
that's true.
academics
It was
and
Roman.
theologians and everything.
No one debates it.
Who really knows? I
no
mean,
one- everyone
it's
knows.
a big question. It's a big question.
Apparently, only one person doesn't. That's you. So he was Roman.
But what I would like to see is a Pope Patrick because I would love to see the Irish finally get some representation. you know
That's
what I mean?
not-
Okay.
How
We
much
knew-
more
we knew that.
representation do you need?
We
You
knew
guys
that
have
was
fucking
coming, okay.
McDonald's. Fucking clowns all over the world.
You said that the last time I
Yeah,
came down
Yeah.
here.
Oh, you're
How much
talking.
more representation do you need? There's a fucking clown on every corner. Every time we see that motherfucker, we're like Hong Kong Irish.
All right. So first of all, you're talking about the greatest restaurant and the greatest global restaurant enterprise on the planet,
I just said that.
right? But you know what though? Still, it's like I said earlier.
Red hair, big nose, big
Still,
feet, Irish.
Still, the greatest export of the Irish is storytelling. Most beautiful. That's the number one
We
export
know that's true.
of the
You
Irish.
demonstrated that tonight. You haven't shut the fuck up once. You know, that's true.
I want a Pope Lando.
I think that's great.
And I'm not even saying that because Lando is black and he's in the space with the stars.
Clarissa.
I'm saying that because that name
Kate.
sounds cool as heck.
Sabah.
Lando. Bro.
But if it ended up being Cardinal Sarah and he takes the name Lando, I think that would be great.
That would be awesome.
It's a holy place.
Holy place, man.
So, what Pope name would you want?
Like Mario.
Margot.
Oh, Mario?
Where are you?
Why not Luigi?
Too tall. Probably Northern Italian, German.
He's probably a cardinal from Milan, huh? Yeah.
Yeah. Now, would you accept like a cardinal or a like a pope like a Pope Giuseppe or something?
Giuseppe.
Yeah, that would be fun.
What about Pinocchio?
Don't like that one.
I thought that was a good movie. No, I didn't see the live. Did you see the live action one?
I did not.
Yeah, I didn't see the live action one.
So, boys, this is good.
This is
We're
good.
gonna
This is
do
a lot of
another.
fun.
Or we're gonna do another one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, hell
right.
yeah.
I'm all in, dude. Let's,
Before I head back to the Cascades.
The next one we'll make sure is a lot more structured.
Yeah, I don't know what the fuck you guys are talking about half the time.
Yeah.
I'm sure you didn't.
Yeah. Dude, you were just rambling.
So, yeah, we'll finish
we
up.
were on the same page.
On the same- we
You,
were
I don't know
vibing,
where the fuck
brother.
you went, dude.
We were vibing.
You segued into your own world.
Well, let's yeah. Well, the next one we'll figure out another badass topic to talk about.
There we go.
And I really feel like in this conversation we solved feminism.
I don't even know if we talked about it.
Yeah. We danced around it.
Yeah,
and
I mean, we brushed against
at
it.
least we included it in our conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
We're inclusionary here.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Right?
Yeah, we're all about inclusion.
We're all about inclusion.
That is true.
There we go.
We're talking about feminism, and we even represented it.
Boom.
What,
Yep.
33% of us
All right.
are
Hit it.
women. Yeah,
Hit it.
there we go.
That's you.
It's you.
That's you.
Edit.
All right, everybody.
Yeah. Love you guys. Talk to you soon.